There is a continent called Taiwu, a special place where martial arts take on a new meaning. On this continent there is a kingdom, in the center of which there is a town called Yulin. In this wonderful sun-drenched town, there is the residence of one of 4 families. One sunny day, a training session was taking place on the residence grounds, and the teacher's voice was giving instructions on how to move correctly. There were more than 15 warriors in the martial arts training area, and the trainer boldly gave commands for them to focus on their waists. The warriors tried to move as one. One of the boys was tired and unhappy that the boy he didn't like was still living in their house. The boy with long hair said that it was because of his family. His father was the successor of one of the 4 great families. There was a hint of arrogance in his voice. He didn't want to hear about such scum anymore. After a few movements, the guys stopped and began to discuss his superiority. Some of them had to admit his superiority. Suddenly, the teacher's voice was heard. He squeezed the rope and said that they needed to hurry and not give up training. At this time, the main character did not even know what was happening behind his back. A guy named Feng Hao was peacefully taking a bath. He used the best ingredients from the Feng family's resources, and he was also isolated from others for a while. The boy was confident that these drugs had no effect on him. A middle-aged man entered the room, the smell of herbs attracting his attention. His lips involuntarily spread into a smile. He was curious about the effect of the herbs. He dipped his hand into the water. A bath with valuable herbs can increase strength and achieve a hardening effect on the body. The guy got dressed and said that for someone like him, so many valuable herbs were excessive, but he was not going to give up. Even if he was born an outcast, it didn't mean that people could look down on him. Feng was determined to win. Only intensive training could help him with this. There was a noise nearby. The guy asked who was there. He clearly felt the presence. It seemed like someone was behind him. A stranger in a demon mask appeared in front of him. The girl addressed the hero as a brother and said that he was too slow. The guy was scared. He didn't expect that in just 2 years she could become stronger than him. The girl with pink hair said that she believed in him and that he could do better. The hero called the girl by name. Wangsun said that she came with good news that the master of the martial arts academy had accepted her as a student. Feng said that such a talented girl deserved to study at such a prestigious place. Besides, 4 great families could enter there. He wanted to go with her. In this country, everyone valued strength. The ice warrior Yun appeared in front of the children. She wanted to check out the guy who was related to the famous family. Wangsun shouted that the guy needed a chance and he would prove himself. The boy grabbed his sister by the shoulder. He replied that this warrior was not worthy of being his master. Yun didn't expect the boy to be so self-confident. She wanted to show him his place. The guy felt her aura. He instantly had the feeling that she was going to try to kill him. All he could do was put up a block in front of himself. But the speed was too fast. He couldn't do anything. Feng didn't want it to end here and now. The warrior was surprised that the boy not only withstood her attack, but also absorbed her energy. A light appeared around. The girl couldn't move. The guy didn't remove the block. The girl looked down at him. She immediately realized that his body worked like a black hole, absorbing all the energy. Yun became wary and attacked him. Although for Feng, this was the very chance to destroy her. Suddenly, a blow hit the guy in the back. A fountain of blood spurted from his mouth, and he screamed in pain. Wangsun called out to her brother. The ice warrior understood that the boy could kill her. There was no choice. The girl asked the master what she had done to him. Yun replied that she did not kill him. Feng was unconscious. A cosmic vision appeared in his head. He did not know where he was, or whether he was alive or dead. Something like a wormhole appeared in his body. Energy came out of him. It began to envelop the space from all sides. Feng didn't understand what this feeling was. It was the first time for him. A wave pierced his entire body, and he felt like he was about to explode. The energy swirled the space around him. He felt as if he had awakened from a sleep that had lasted for hundreds of years. A creature he had never seen before appeared before him, and thanked him for the energy he had brought him. Feng wanted to know who was speaking to him, and why this being was able to control the energy in his body. The creature replied that it would help him change his life. The protagonist caught himself thinking that this creature could be the reason why he could not develop for so many years. He was overcome with rage, and an accusation that it was all his fault burst from his mouth. Suddenly, the guy woke up in his room. It seemed to him that it was all a dream. A beautiful brunette was holding a tray in her hands. She saw that the boy had woken up and said with concern that he was training too hard. It turned out that it was his mother. She said that the master of the academy brought him last night. The guy felt that such a person did not deserve any gratitude. He answered directly that he didn't like such people. His mother reminded him that Wangsun had been accepted to the master's program, so he shouldn't neglect the academy's connections. The father entered the room and said that as the successor to the family, he must protect the foundations. Feng remembered the ice warrior's words about him being trash. The father wanted to support his son. He encouraged him by saying that the Feng family's dreams were not losing their heads. However, the boy could not tell his father what had happened. At this time, the elders were discussing the admission of a new student. No one expected that the first student would be a representative of the Wang family. The gray-bearded man grinned. The ice warrior sat down opposite him, then said that representatives of such families are all extraordinary. A representative of the Feng family entered the hall, and his escort announced his arrival. The boy's father apologized for being late. Wang Xin's eyes lit up with joy when she saw that the boy was okay. The academy representative ordered not to approach the outcast and to keep his distance. Wang Xin turned to the man, called him father, and reminded him that it was this outcast who saved her life. The man turned to Elder Feng and asked him not to tarnish his daughter's honor. Otherwise, he will teach him a valuable lesson. The ice warrior felt she needed to be on guard. Her gaze stopped on the boy, and with her gaze she sent a blade of wind into his knee. Feng tried to resist, but the wind blade was so fast that it was impossible to dodge. Even on the brink of death, the boy was not afraid. His father turned to the warrior. He did not want a conflict, but the reasons for her attack were unclear to him. Before answering, she repeated the same move twice, this time on the elder Feng. The man did not expect such a reaction. He fell to his knees. Thus, competition arose between the families. The warrior humiliated the elder Feng with the phrase that he and his son were just scum. The man understood that he was no match for her, but he was not ready to humiliate himself in front of her, even if his life was at stake. The girl rushed forward and shouted that she would help him die. It would be her favor. Wang Xin began to beg her to stop. The girl stood up to defend the Feng family. The boy screamed that she was a crazy sorceress because of whom everyone could have died last night. Clenching his hand into a fist, he rushed to attack. The warrior was interested in how good he was at self-control. Yun remembered what happened the day before. She replied that she had the ice attribute and she would spare him this time. Wang Xin's father turned to the master and asked her not to be angry. Those present asked not to waste her talent. The guy was determined to take revenge for the public shame he had experienced because of her. The warrior emphasized that she needed 6 years to reach the level of great martial arts, and the arrogance of such a small boy only amused her. She suggested that Feng catch her in 3 years. The guy was willing to wait 3 years, provided that he killed her with his own hands. His eyes were full of revenge. Then he decisively threw a phrase in her direction that he would finish her off. He had the opportunity to take a little rest, but the main character still couldn't relax. At this time, the Feng dynasty gathered together. This time, the reason for the gathering was the family's reputation, which had been destroyed by rumors. The great sage wanted to understand why he had to blush for his own family. He reprimanded the younger and older Feng, and it was because of them that the family's image was damaged. He announced that the head would change in a few days. Family members understood that a change of patriarch was inevitable. Junior Feng called out to his father, feeling annoyed and needing to apologize to him. Suddenly, he was overcome by a feeling of helplessness, and even had dark thoughts about how he was no good at all. At the same time, he was overcome by a desire that was unknown to him before. It was a wild desire to become the best. Suddenly, a soft hand patted the guy on the head. The father assured his son that he trusted him completely and would always be proud of him. He reminded us that in this world all power lies in force. Feng began to think that this world needed changes. A voice was heard somewhere nearby, and the guy winced with displeasure. He was scared and even felt like he was crazy for a second, because the voice came from inside. Could it be that what happened yesterday wasn't a dream, and the monster he saw wasn't an illusion? The voice said that it was ready to make him stronger. He absorbed all his herbs and potions just to make his virtual martial arts body better. The voice said that he had a series of decisions to make. The flow of solutions was understood to be a special program of work on the body that involves risk. A desire to become stronger was burning inside him. The only thing that bothered him was that time was running short. The guy closed his eyes. More than anything in the world, he wanted his family to be proud of him. Suddenly a fire began to flare up in his chest, and energy began to burst out of him. His body vibrated. It was ready to tear itself apart. Suddenly, a wild pain in his chest overwhelmed him. The voice said that now he could not be afraid and open his eyes. A creature appeared in front of him that caught his attention, and it distracted me from the painful sensations. A cute chibi of a girl appeared in front of him. She introduced herself as Feng Lao. Despite her diminutive size, she sternly commanded that she be called mistress. After the phrase about him having to kneel before this little girl, he was overcome with bewilderment. The creature looked like a small doll. Feng grabbed his head. He had been under a lot of stress lately, and it was better for him to take a break. A golden notebook appeared in front of him. The guy understood that he was about to learn a low-level technique, which was considered a universal training technique in all cities. Feng Lao noticed that her teaching technique had dropped. Chibik slipped away in the other direction. The guy shouted that there was a real treasure in front of him. The girl smiled. The boy saw Feng Lao again. The little girl smiled funny and started asking questions. The guy was puzzled by the technique she used. The little girl said she usually used it as a tea stand. The main character shouted that he didn't understand such jokes. In addition, there were 3 types of teaching methods on this continent. It was about forging the body, fighting energy, and fighting abilities. This particular book was perfect for those who wanted to improve their body. The masters used this secret and covert method of training martial energy. Fighting ability was an important part of any warrior's personal strength. The training was divided into 5 levels: Tian, De, Xuan, Huang, and Wu. The levels were divided into high, medium, and low. Feng Lao said that she had a lot of tea left over. The guy suddenly felt ill. He began to beg her to make him her disciple. The little girl screamed that she finally had a student. Feng couldn't understand why she was acting like a child. Her eyes sparkled because her current identity was that of a teacher. And besides, the stream of decisions that had to be carried out might not be succumbed to everyone. Feng needed her advice on how to develop the flow of solutions. Lao explained that when he became physically stronger, then other training methods could be used. He gave his word that he would follow all his instructions. The guy had to continue training. He was ready to follow any training method. First of all, he needed to focus on the strength of the starving tiger. One of the observers did not take her eyes off Feng. It was even a little sad that the father was no longer a patriarch suddenly. They were deafened by a sound wave. They didn't understand who could have caused the explosion. He didn't expect this. Moreover, he quickly broke through to the 3rd level. This little master really didn't lie to him. It was important to continue training at the same level. One of the teachers realized that the boy had not had a break for a long time and was most likely tired. It was necessary to report to the patriarch. The teacher was surprised by his success during the morning training. The rest were interested in whether there were other phenomena. The sage was surprised by such a breakthrough on his part. Feng said that the problem was that his way of creating his body was different from others. The elder did not understand what the difference was. This method was needed to control physical strength. It was a high-class training method. He didn't expect to see such a level. The family had only 1 volume of high-class teaching methods. They were supposed to test the martial arts training method. One was curious about what kind of instruction he had received. The protagonist took a deep breath. Then exhale. He had enough strength to control the blow. The guy wanted to practice one more technique. Tears rolled down his cheeks, but he couldn't stop at that moment. The teaching method used in this case is a secret. The rest of the family began to talk about what was happening. The sage was struck by the thought that finally someone had appeared who could help him observe him. The head of the fans saw them. He understood that the news should not have spread just like that. The protagonist's father turned his gaze to him and was overcome with a feeling of pride. The boy at this time returned to training with Feng Lao. The baby was unhappy that she was woken up. She asked the boy why he had disturbed his teacher's sleep. Feng replied that he could not practice the teaching method for long because he got tired quickly. Lao sleepily said that this was a result of his body not being very resilient. The master opened her eyes and asked him if he had ever heard of alchemy. The guy hesitated. He understood that in the city people didn't just talk about alchemists. On the Taiwu continent, in addition to martial arts masters, there were also masters who specialized in creating poison. The essence of the alchemist profession is that no matter how highly they cultivate, they will have to heal the people. To become a representative of the profession, one must have a pharmacopoeia, then swallow and retain the elixir in one's body. The amount of elixir required is terrifying to be able to condense. At that time, the poison master was the opposite. Lao said that the modern pharmacopoeia and poison codes are of too low quality. The little girl said it was no use to him anyway. A glow appeared around the guy. He thought that he could become legendary among alchemists. He opened the scroll he had in his hands. He was terribly curious about what was inside. The guy carefully unfolded the parchment, took a pause, and he began to understand the ancient writings. He was immediately overcome with rage, because there was nothing on the paper, not a single letter. Lao called the guy names and said that only those who have virtual martial arts can control her. Then she ordered that blood be dropped into the middle of the roll. Then the text would become available to her. Feng didn't understand what was happening. After a pause of a couple of seconds, he decided that he would do what he was asked. There was no weapon at hand, so he had to cut himself with his teeth. A few drops of blood dripped onto his leg. He felt the power of light. The hero turned his gaze towards Lao. Then he exclaimed that he was aware of all the synthetic formulas. It was amazing. Now all the formulas were in his head. He just needed to focus on the right one. The little master, without opening her eyes, asked Feng not to embarrass himself with his level of knowledge. Feng felt he simply had to study alchemy further. The little girl replied that such an elixir was like food for her. The guy was very amused by this. She was unhappy that she had to explain such simple things. Feng was upset. Despite the low quality, this elixir was enough for her. It was necessary to concentrate. Various components for the elixir began to appear in his head. He needed to remember the components. The boy called out to the little girl, but the master disappeared into thin air, as if she had never been there. After some time, the main character reached the market. Somewhere nearby, they were discussing the price of a sword. A voice named the price for a sarong head and dragon scales. Feng replied that he only had 50 gold pieces. He felt awkward because he had never bargained before. The merchant was indignant. The boy heard someone call his name. There were several guys standing behind him. They said that he was no longer the son of the patriarch. The young man with the bob hair and impudent look immediately recognized the son of the Feng family. It seemed that this impudent fellow knew very well that Senior Feng was no longer in business. The protagonist was puzzled that he heard gossip behind his back. He realized that there were too many people gathered here to discuss this. The hero decided that they were behaving inappropriately. The impudent man and his gang made a caustic remark to him. The guy made a displeased face. Then he attacked him with screams. His fists were already flying towards Feng. A scuffle began. The guys were surprised that he managed to stop the blow in time. Feng also dodged another blow. The guy fell to the ground with all his weight. He was angry that such a pathetic boy like him had disgraced him in front of everyone. He was only amused by his opponent's reaction. The others saw in him a third-level student, but the guy shouted for them not to stand still and to attack. One of the observers wanted to take a closer look at the guy's face. The eldest of the Feng family asked why he was asking for help. The guy called him uncle and said that he was too impulsive. He was ready to pay back for that. The enemy asked to prepare the best elixir for him. Feng remained calm. The guy replied that in a month he was ready to kill the city's residents in front of his eyes. Feng was glad to see his father. Senior Feng said that he would surprise everyone in a couple of years. He was glad that he had seen what was happening from the very beginning. The boy was pleased with his father's praise, but he still had a lot to learn. He turned to Master Lao. Cutie Lao didn't want to wake up. The boy warned her that he had obtained all the necessary ingredients. The master did not wake up. She only replied that people in this century are not very smart, since they cannot simply mix the ingredients. The guy was surprised when Lao said that he needed to eat all the necessary ingredients. He thought it was raw material. Suddenly, hieroglyphs appeared above him that he had never seen before. They disappeared the moment he saw them. There was nothing left to do but eat the ingredients. He didn't understand what to do next. He needed to concentrate, so he closed his eyes. His body began to fill with an energy he had never felt before. The space in front of him changed. A green haze filled everything around. Feng tried to understand what was happening. Suddenly I saw a sphere in front of me, then another element that was unfamiliar to him. The guy didn't understand what was happening. He felt his body begin to fill with incredible energy. The feeling of his own strength and power made him want to train. He thrust his fist forward. Then I decided to practice a few techniques. The sun did not spare anyone. He was drenched in sweat from the heat. The guy closed his eyes. He needed to restore his physical strength, and now he could do it in a few minutes. The elixir was purified from impurities and could be stored in the body at any time. However, a problem was discovered in the plant ingredients. Besides, he had enough ingredients to buy the herb. The main character wanted to see Master Lao. Chibik Lao appeared in front of him and asked about the effect of using it. Feng was glad to see her. Lao replied that she didn't have any ingredients to give him, but she was willing to exchange books with herbs. Lao gave him a sly look and said that he was being stupid. The master gave him the sand palm, Xuan level, fist and cloud actions. Feng never expected that she would pass on martial arts to him. He understood that there would be a commotion in the city. When he returned, he immediately saw what he was looking for. His father had taken him here when he was little. He needed to sell something, and at a very good price. He was met by a fair-haired girl who kindly offered her help. The guy wanted to sell something at auction, so to protect his identity, he put on a mask. Then he handed him a book, those same famous Xuan-level martial arts. The fair-haired girl was amazed. The others also noticed they had never seen this martial arts book before. One of them shouted that this was a treasure that needed to be reported to the family immediately. The girl bowed and began to apologize. She wanted to discuss the details with the master. At this time, a man began to descend the stairs. It was the owner. He greeted the guest, and thought that the one who brought such a rare item should not have remained just a stranger to him. He asked what exactly he wanted to put up for auction. The owner said that his auction house would help him sell everything at the price he set. It would take a few days. The auction could be scheduled in 3 days. Feng said he needed more than money. The owner of the auction house was ready to offer him anything. The guy smiled and replied that he would need an elixir. It was expected that the price of such a martial art would be higher. The owner needed to think a little. The man addressed the protagonist as a master alchemist and said that he was simply an unworthy person. Feng replied that the help of such an influential person would be very welcome. However, he should not let his guard down. The owner ordered that the entire list of herbal ingredients be brought to him. A special folder appeared in front of him. in which everything he needed was stored. The owner offered Feng to look and take everything he needed as a deposit. The hero was ready to take from him what he needed, but he was ready to keep the book with the martial arts skill for himself. The owner was a little puzzled. The level and quality of these herbs was not the highest. However, he would not be able to obtain the material. The herbs weren't enough for him. This store had a limited supply of herbal ingredients. Feng said that if anything happens, they will have to get more. He made some notes, but he didn't want to write down the rare herbs yet. The owner was surprised by the level of the alchemist. Few on the continent had such a level as his. The owner said that he would prepare everything. It would be better for him to lose the property but have a good relationship with the person. Feng remained waiting. After some time, the owner announced that all the herbs he needed were ready. He handed him a gift from the pavilion. Feng took the ring and thought that this thing would be useful when working with elixirs. He thanked the owner for the information and said that he had not heard before that there was a special herbal market. As he said goodbye, he said that he would return if he found time. Evening came. He did not stop training. Now he had access to the skills from the elixir, and his body no longer needed to rest. All that remained was to clear my mind. He wanted to meditate for a couple of minutes. A special energy began to concentrate around. Feng used the technique he had learned. Suddenly a special creature appeared. His fur was like that of a zebra, and the muzzle looks like an Arctic tiger. Feng was scared. Before his eyes, the huge cat began to become humanized. It developed arms and legs. The space began to narrow. Feng didn't know what to do. Suddenly, Master Lao appeared out of nowhere and said that he had finally reached the initial physical ability and was able to perform the tiger move. The hero rejoiced. He couldn't believe that he had succeeded in the difficult move. Finally, he mastered Zhuan-level skills. Suddenly, he fell to the ground and began calling for the master. He was writhing in pain. Lao said that he could heal himself. The guy concentrated. He turned to the master and asked what needed to be done. Lao didn't understand how, despite his underdeveloped body, he had a very developed mind. The essence of the tiger's movement was in the method of forging the body, a technique he could learn. The hero replied that he had collected several herbs that would last him for some time. Junior Feng continued to practice his techniques. Lao thought the boy could be of use to her. 3 days passed like this. At this time, the gang said that this teaching method could not be used. It's been a long time since the sick cat was seen. Feng replied that he had no time to gossip. The guys didn't understand why he behaved like that. One of them said that they were all one family, so he shouldn't have said that. The boys said it wouldn't hurt to teach him some good manners. Feng thought they were talking about the auction, but he hurried away. The guys from the gang were not very happy with such arrogance on the part of the main character. Soon at the house where the auction was to take place, an employee approached the owner of the house and informed him that all the guests were waiting only for him. The owner was ready to wait for only one person. Feng returned. He knew that the owner would not start the auction without him. The man said he was willing to wait for him. Everyone was waiting for the auctioneer. He saw him. He looked like someone who would be able to sell a rare teaching method at auction. One of the guests saw the owner and the auctioneer. The cloak and mask gave the main character a special mystery. No one could recognize him in this form. He was even embarrassed that so many people were looking at him. The owner announced the last lot that he wanted to sell personally. Usually the most interesting was left for last, but even under the piece of cloth, the treasure radiated light. The radiance was so strong that it blinded the eyes. Such energy could only come from the sand finger, a Zhuan-level treasure. The owner was ready to announce the bid. The starting price was 50,000 gold, and the increment was supposed to be no less than 1,000. Suddenly, one of the guests doubled the bet. This was a representative of the Wang family. He didn't plan to let such an opportunity slip away. Suddenly, the rate rose to 150,000. Although no one wanted to bring shame on the Wang family, such rare martial arts were clearly worth more. One of those present suddenly named 180,000. The budget for the next few years was already planned, but this could affect the strength of the family. The Feng family wanted to take the top position among the 4 families. Suddenly, a guy appeared who approached the main character as soon as he arrived in the city. There was nothing more to wait for. The moment when everything would end. The moon would illuminate the entire city. The guy who also wanted to place a bet. He thought that this could drive him crazy. The representative of the Wang family was confident that no one would be able to resist him. Sooner or later, the city would submit to him. The bet of 300,000 won. Those who participated in the auction understood that the city would not be the same. The protagonist called out to the Feng family. The father did not recognize his son. Besides, because of the cloak, it was impossible to see who it was. One of the fans was ready to talk to the stranger. He extended his hand in greeting, but the cloaked man turned to Senior Feng. The man prepared himself for a fight because he did not know what to expect in this case. The figure in the cloak asked about money, he answered. Blue Eyes looked at the man carefully. Then the man in the cloak said that he wanted to negotiate. The hand extended a scroll and a book of Xuan martial arts. They didn't understand what was happening. Wang became angry because he expected the treasures to belong to him. Senior Feng tensed up. He was surprised by this attitude. The masked figure would not take no for an answer. The fans exchanged pleasantries. The other two were skeptical. For them, this turn of events was only for the worse. The brunette said that it was a question of influence. Their plan was to attack. At this time, at the fans' residence, the patriarch gathered for a council with the dynasty. He turned to Senior Feng. He was interested in information about who handed over the scroll. Feng Chen didn't know. The patriarch understood that this was very generous help from a stranger. The rest began to discuss the possibility of participating in a competition of 4 families. The patriarch responded that not all Fengs were ready for such large-scale events. One of the representatives said he was offering his child. The elder stood his ground. The man was unhappy that he was being ignored again. However, the patriarch wanted to talk to Feng Chen. Despite the late evening, there was still some time left for conversation. The patriarch said that Junior Feng is the most reliable in the family, so he wanted to entrust him with something. The patriarch praised the boy, and he asked Chen to remain the support of the family. But he can't do anything without his son's help. Senior Feng had to think about a plan of action. The night was conducive to this. Suddenly there was an explosion. It was Hao, the main character who trained even at night. He managed to reach the 4th level of martial arts. The boy heard a familiar voice. It turned out his father was watching him. He asked his son who taught him the new technique. The father guessed that the man in the cloak could have taught him such techniques. Chen came to his son to inform him that he would be participating in the competition of the 4 families. Father said that if he wins, the family will be disgraced. So the next day arrived and everything was ready for the competition. As usual, no one wanted to miss the opportunity to make money, and some had already placed their bets. The audience discussed the favorites. The auction director announced the start of the competition between 4 families. Participation will be random. The next moment, the foot pushed off the ground with a light step, and a new participant appeared, the owner Jan. He instantly captured everyone's attention. Then he said that he was ready to fight. He was the first to challenge the younger Feng to a fight. Hao chuckled. He didn't want to miss the opportunity to prove himself in action. Besides, it was an opportunity for him to show what he had learned. Jan was surprised. He didn't expect that such a scumbag would have the courage to compete with him. The hero replied that he was not afraid of him. The enemy was full of revenge. Besides, they both have already mastered the 4th level skills. Jan jumped up. All he wanted at that moment was for the power of the elixir to help him tear it apart. However, the hero deftly dodged the first attack. Feng wanted to understand what tactics his opponent was using, but Jan was full of hatred and had no plans to stop. The main character had a few seconds to repel the attack. The leg deftly stopped the blow. Feng used one of his 4th level moves and stopped the enemy in mid-air. A moment later, he disappeared. Spectators discussed who exactly would win in this case. Jan was furious. The observers discussed who would be able to turn the tide of the battle. Hao came into view again. The enemy only became more angry. He decided to use his technique. With a brutal roar, he rushed towards him. Even this couldn't frighten the hero. He quickly figured out his tactics. This time, it was necessary to act faster. Jan understood that if he hesitated, it would cost him his life. He was barely holding on to keep from falling. It was impossible to keep up with Feng. And then, what had to happen happened. He couldn't avoid it. Feng stood above him, illuminated by the rays of the sun. Without hesitation, he aimed his fist at his opponent. Only a miracle could help the enemy escape. Jan began to beg him not to kill him, but it was too late. Someone from the family shouted at them to stop, but it was too late. Feng laughed and said that he didn't mean to kill anyone. His opponent just lost consciousness. Hao emerged victorious in this fight. Everyone started to support him. The next challenger said he was ready for a fight. Viewers discussed how the Wang family had always been self-confident. The enemy did not want to reveal all his trump cards, but he had something in store. He took something that could help him in the battle. It is this doping that will help him move up to the 5th level. In the fight for the city, any means could be useful. The fans saw the enemy's power. The man screamed that it was not an actual enhancement. He felt pressure on his side. The thing is that during training, the human body is like a bottle of water. By absorbing the power of martial arts from heaven and earth into your body, this bottle becomes full, and eventually, this allows you to break through to the next level. The difficulty of absorbing energy at different levels varies. The higher the level, the more difficult it is to absorb energy. However, the family had a different tradition. They accumulate energy without making breakthroughs at low levels. In this case, they wait for the right time to break through to the next level. As a result, they move to a new level, but retain greater strength. The guy wanted to know what level he was at. He suspected that his power was too great. It was the average 5th level. The guy turned to the main character and said that he should take the initiative. If not, he will do it himself. Feng didn't expect such a reaction. He moved at incredible speed. His power destroyed everything around him. The opponent said that he would not let him win. The hero blocked the blow. The enemy had no plans to stop. He'll have to try hard if he wants to win this round. The hero held the line. He barely had enough strength. If he hadn't trained, he would have been a corpse long ago. Level 5 was too high for him. The father did not take his eyes off him, mentally hoping that his son would be able to win. The enemy said he was ready to mock him a little more. Then he shouted that this was just the beginning. All that remains is to warm up properly. With these words, he rushed towards Hao Feng. The hero successfully dodged. Although he understood that he would not be able to defeat him so easily, the enemy shouted for Feng to surrender immediately. The hero thought that he had no right to give up. All he had left to do was give it his all in the next attack. Whether there will be enough strength is a mystery. He was determined. Although he was not afraid of death, there was only one problem. The boys clashed fists. The impact was so strong that the waves spread all around. She swept away everything in her path. The hero understood that death was near. His family was ready to win. The opponent realized that he had won the bet. The next moment, he simply fell to his knees. Suddenly, Junior Feng gathered all his will into a fist. Victory was his. The audience held its breath. Nobody expected such a turn of events. One of the viewers said that he could reach the 5th level. During this time, Feng also reached the 5th level. If it weren't for the pharmacopoeia, he would have been in danger. To win, he had to defend himself. First, he needed to gather all his fighting power in his hand to prepare for the final attack. He wanted to unleash the power of the tiger. He would never allow anyone to treat him like that again. The next moment, the enemy rushed at him. Feng blocked his blow. A hieroglyph appeared in front of him. In any case, the victory was Hao's. He felt an inner strength within himself. This force reminded him of a sphere. It began to change shape. The sphere was ready to explode. Feng realized that this was the sound of a breakthrough. It seemed to him that things couldn't get any better. Finally, he was able to show everyone what level he had. The auction owner announced his victory. Kofu won the second match. The spectators rejoiced. The host announced the third round and invited the participants who were ready to fight the Wang family to the match. There were no young people on the 5th level. Feng Hao was victorious. The counterattack from the Feng family representative was impressive. The hero needed a few minutes to catch his breath. Too much effort was expended. He bowed before Elder Feng. The father felt proud of his son. Tired but happy, Feng said he wouldn't dare disappoint the guy. In the evening at the residence, one of Wang's representatives wanted to know the situation in the city. Before, they discussed the abilities of members of other families. The guy with the scar and burn on his face said there was nothing they could do. The relationship between the families was unknown. This meant that they were helpless. The long-haired brunette said that they could trust the Feng family. The main character sat in meditation. A noise was heard nearby. It was already late, and Feng became wary. Laughter was heard. A dark figure rushed towards him. The man in the cloak threatened the guy, so running would be useless. The guy didn't expect to see this man here. The figure was wearing a cloak and a mask. He said that someone wanted to take his life. The hero did not understand what they were talking about. There was energy all around. A moment later, she disappeared. The man in the mask seemed to be waiting for something. It took Feng a second to dissolve into space. The man in the cloak said he would not let him live. Then he ordered him to obey, otherwise it would be worse. Hao Feng was injured, but it took time to recover. He didn't know what to do. In his mind, he called out to Master Lao. It took him a couple of minutes for his arm to recover. The man walked between the trees. He should still be here. The guy didn't understand what was going on. Somewhere in the distance, a silhouette was visible. The masked man was glad to have found his prey. It took him a couple of seconds to reach it. The figure caught Feng off guard. He shouted that no one dared to deceive him. Suddenly, he felt pressure. The guy in the raincoat realized that something was up. Feng flew out from behind the trees and moved to attack. He had to use the heavenly tiger palm. The impact was very strong. Nothing could be seen. The fog around cleared. The voice said that death awaited him. The blow threw the figure to the side. Part of the clothes and the mask were destroyed. The man said that he used all his strength. The body could no longer withstand the effects of the attack. The guy was scared. His life hung by a thread. Hao Feng shouted that he wouldn't be able to catch him. The boy did not understand that he was not an opponent for him. The masked man said that no one had ever climbed the monster mountain alone before. It was better for him to return alive. Climbing the mountain of monsters was for those who definitely did not want to live. Suddenly, the attack hit the masked guy. Suddenly, a representative of the family appeared and noted that such a worthless person was not capable of handling even a child. No one knew how much time had passed, but no one could catch up with Feng. His body was tired. He was at his limit. Something terrible could have happened to him. Finally, he fell to the ground, exhausted. Suddenly, a monster appeared in front of him. Another one appeared next. Feng couldn't get up, even though he felt the presence of danger. Suddenly, he was attacked from all sides. Something scared them, and they immediately started running away. It turned out that Master Lao decided to help him. The day came, the sun was hot. Feng lay unconscious. Soon the guy woke up. He was even able to make a few movements. The guy had absolutely no memory of how he ended up there. Something told him that he couldn't cope without outside help. The boy got scared as soon as he heard extraneous sounds. There was no need to be afraid. Master Lao simply appeared above the hero. She said that she saved him from the monsters last night. Feng thanked her, but most of all, he wanted to know where to go next. The girl replied that Hao would have to survive on his own. If he was to somehow survive on his own, there was not a minute to lose. So he folded his hands in a farewell gesture and moved on. Suddenly the realization came that he would remain a nobody. His virtual body is not omnipotent, unfortunately. He also remembered that in 3 years he would have to fight the Ice Warrior, and Master Lao reminded him that his family needed protection. Feng decided that he needed to conquer the mountain to be prepared for the difficulties. Lao closed her eyes in bliss. At this time in the residence, the guy in the raincoat sat on the floor wounded and replied that he was not lying. The hand hit the table with force, and the voice replied that when it came to family, there was no time to waste. Feng Sr. was ready to destroy the guy. One of the Feng family called the others for help. The man with a beard ordered the warriors to be gathered. While they were preparing for the attack, deep night fell. They had to attack the residence. Fans assessed the situation. They were met by a family who were clearly not prepared for their arrival. Chen was angry. He hadn't planned to be nice to them. He was ready to destroy them. Feng called the enemy to him. There will be no mercy. The family was puzzled by their methods. But a second later, one of their representatives said that since they had come to fight, they would fight back. The other one said that he would not allow them to destroy their residence. The family representatives rushed to the attack. The fans were hit with blows. One after another, they fought off the attacks. The fog soon cleared. But it wasn't easy for Chen to fight everyone at the same time. The family members quickly ran out of steam. Fans said they simply underestimated their power. The guys shouted that they would not let them leave this place. An order to stop was heard in the air. One of the fans suspected something was wrong. He couldn't recognize the voice. It was a long-haired man with a fan in his hands. It turned out that it was he himself, the general of the pavilion guard. He explained that if even one of the families died, life in the city would be disrupted. The general hovered above them, watching the battle from a safe distance. One of the fans explained that someone had threatened his younger brother, and then forced him to go to the monster mountain, so they had come to take revenge, the general thought. He said that such actions are prohibited in the city. Therefore, all he can do in this situation is to send help that can find his brother on the mountain of monsters. The fans said they were only willing to leave the place out of respect for the general. The bearded man made a couple of threats to avoid losing his reputation. After which, the family headed back. Chen was ready to do anything for his son. However, the family that the fans came to remember this invasion for a long time. At this time, somewhere in the mountains, Hao Feng chose one of the caves, which in his opinion looked safe. There he continued his training. His stamina, movements, and speed had to be more refined. A movement from the Book of Xuan appeared in his head, then another one. He clearly saw the third technique. Master Lao appeared next to him and advised him to reduce the load and control his strength. Anyone who has never fought for life could not understand what it is to fight to the limit of one's abilities. She said that a hunt would be waiting for him in the morning, but he would have to face 6th-level magical beasts, something Hao never expected. He had to fight a 6th-level fire beast. He became afraid because his enemies were much stronger than him. An attack from such a monster can be fatal. However, there is no choice of enemy. More than anything, he wanted to focus on what was lurking in the smoke. A moment later, a monster flew out at him. Such a creature will not be easy to defeat. It was obviously difficult to fight against him. His attack range was much steeper. Decisions had to be made quickly. It was necessary to find some trick. A plan instantly formed in his head. It didn't matter at all how strong he was. At first, he wanted to make smoke using the tiger palm. But first, he needed to get rid of the hot air around him. Besides, it's just an animal that has no brain. The guy threw a stone in his direction. The fire monster turned its attention to him. He jumped up from his seat. The guy screamed that the monster would only face inevitable death. But a wave of fire hit him. A shockwave spread around. It was painful. He couldn't understand how it was possible. Chibik Lao said that the fire beasts had a sense of smell 30 times stronger than his. Such little tricks were useless. The guy asked the master why she didn't report this earlier. The fire monster smiled. However, Feng was ready to destroy him with one blow. The monster crawled towards him and cursed. The guy just shouted that the monster could have waited until he ran away. While Hao was fighting the monster, Cutie Lao didn't even wake up. And all this at the very moment when he needed help the most. The master finally woke up, and the first thing she wanted to know after waking up was how he used the tiger palm. The guy didn't expect such a question. The monster screamed. The only ability that could help him was the speed of a tiger. His palm formed a technique called the 5 fingers of the tiger spirit. The main character attacked him. In a split second, he managed to defeat the monster. His body lay peacefully on the grass. Even though his hands were bloody, the battle helped him increase his speed and focus his attacks. The pile of bones that lay on the ground looked terrifying. Hao was so hungry that he could not get enough food. It turned out that the monster was very tasty. The little master reminded the hero that thanks to the pharmacopoeia, no one else could have obtained such power. The hero replied that he needed very little time. He had to reach the 6th level of martial arts. While the guy was having dinner, Lao said that the guy's strength was so low that he was taking a big risk. The boy replied that he would try to think of something. The girl's eyes expressed a question. She called Hao to follow her. She was eager to show him something. The guy managed to grab a few pieces of meat just in case. The master hid behind a tree. Suddenly he saw a sharp movement, then another one. Lao asked him what he felt. Feng guessed that it was a magical monster hiding among the trees. He needed to concentrate. A glow began to emanate from him. Most likely the spiritual herbs began to work. Moreover, high-level herbs also worked. Little Lao was pleased that he understood how the treasure worked. She suddenly asked him to stop. The boy asked what happened. The master replied that it was a magical herb. 3 spirit beasts are called to guard her. He felt awkward and replied that he was joking. Lao explained that fighting the fire beast was nothing, as the magical herb only appeared once every century. The guy felt like a fool. He was determined to kill them. Lao asked him to stop, and she said that he had time to prepare for the meeting with the animals. He needed to achieve maximum strength in the shortest possible time. The guy had no doubt in his abilities, but Lao understood that he had a difficult path ahead. The moon illuminated the sky, and the full moon created a special mystery around. Hao Feng crafted a semblance of a spear. For this he used bones and branches. Lao saw this and praised the guy for his effort. The guy was pleased. He had already imagined the monsters he would have to fight. The moon was high, and the night did not bode well. The monsters could have been much smarter. It was necessary to be careful. He could be attacked at any moment. A fire monster appeared in front of him. They are very sensitive to human scent. Therefore, they could attack suddenly. The idea of attacking him secretly came into his head. Besides, he already knew the beast's tactics. He called the monster names to get its attention. The monster made an unpleasant sound to scare the hero. He had no time to think. The guy dodged the attack. The monster screamed, apparently in pain. Then he asked what it felt like to be attacked with a weapon made from himself. He understood that this was not all. It was necessary to apply new technology. He pointed the spear at him. The guy hit the target right on target. Blood gushed in all directions. It was too easy for him. The monster's level was low, such creatures would not attack alone. He remembered the master's words about being careful. Together, these creatures could easily kill him. Several monsters were already rushing towards him. He realized that they were behaving too harmoniously in the group. The monsters easily managed to break through the defense and wound the main character. Lao warned that he could die. He needed a plan. He moved away to a safe distance. The monsters couldn't let the guy escape. The hero shouted that they couldn't handle him. He still had the speed advantage. They continued to pursue him. The boy disappeared among the trees. It was too early to give up, and he decided to outsmart them by grabbing a liana. The monsters did not expect such a reception and stopped for a moment. Suddenly, rays of light broke through the ground. Behind them, wooden stakes as sharp as knives grew out of the ground. They blocked the path of the fiery creatures. The main character had some time. He stopped to take a rest. The boy easily cut the rope. Something rushed towards the monsters. The monsters did not understand from which side they were being attacked. The piece of wood that Hao had secured between the trees looked more like a battering ram. The monsters realized that they would not be able to escape. They started to run away. However, it was too late. Besides, he already had a plan. One of the fire beasts dug its claws into the ground. They began to be pulled underground. The ram literally knocked them into the pit. The monsters were trapped. The boy walked up to them and looked into the hole. He laughed and said that now they had nowhere to run from him. The monsters were so frightened that they huddled close to each other. The protagonist was ready to activate the tiger power. He had to use the heavenly palm. Suddenly Lao appeared next to him. She didn't expect that the guy was still alive. The hero replied that he would not die so easily. Lao replied that it was worth it. But first, it was necessary to return to the cave. It's good that they managed to find their way back. There were herbs growing in the cave. These were very strong herbs, high level. The plant looked extremely unusual. He had never seen anything like it before. It was a fire dragon flower. Lao knew that if she picked it after 100 years, a royal elixir would emerge, one of the rarest. Moreover, this elixir had medicinal properties that were the subject of legends. Lao said that the hero would not be able to live that long. A small hand reached out to the flower. The master asked the hero to dig up the roots and take a look. The boy thought, but he didn't argue. As soon as his hands touched the ground, a glow appeared. He was curious about what it was. The glow grew brighter. It was called a battle crystal. The boy didn't know what to do in this situation. For a warrior, a battle crystal is a second life. It was formed from heavenly and earthly self-defense energy. After being refined, it could quickly increase the fighting energy in the body. Moreover, it could increase the chance of success in a breakthrough. After all, Master Lao said that she would not treat him badly. They would need to continue training. Besides, the guy said that he would continue to train diligently. 5 days have passed. Hao chased the monster. The creature ran further and further away from him. The guy couldn't keep up with him. It was a creature that looked like a monkey. Feng couldn't let the primate escape from him. There was no other way but to catch him. He almost caught up with the beast. One more moment and he would have completed the task. But the beast deftly grabbed a tree branch with its hands and Hao Feng flew forward. He got scared. After all, a precipice awaited him ahead. He barely had enough strength to stop. Luckily, he managed to break at the very edge. Before he could stop, the monkey pounced on him. The monkey pushed the guy off the cliff. The guy was flying down. Hao screamed in fear. A lake awaited him below. He had nothing to grab onto in flight. The red-haired girl with green eyes heard someone screaming. Looking up, she saw the main character flying down on her. The guy splashed into the water, splashing everywhere. The girl hurried to get dressed. The guy didn't immediately come to his senses after the fall. The girl was ready to tear the main character to pieces, Hao pleaded. She looked at him with displeasure. But there was absolutely nowhere to run from them. A muscular guy in armor appeared in front of him. There were several others around him. He was in a wounded state and offered to surrender so that he could fully enjoy his body. The main character asked the girl if she was injured. The girl screamed that if they made noise, she would kill him. The red-haired girl was angry and told Hao not to cross her path again. Otherwise, there would be no mercy. She grabbed the staff. The girl said that no one could kill her. She was ready to fight. The boys were taken aback and couldn't take their eyes off her. Hao thought about the crystal. He immediately realized that she was a martial arts master. The sword master asked who was ready to die first. One of the gang members shouted that the girl was injured and that she shouldn't leave. In her current condition, she wouldn't be able to fight for long. Suddenly, she used the thunder whip. The guy didn't understand who she was. And where does she get such strength? The girl was ready to give them hell, but her opponents ran away. The guy with the mustache said that no one would be able to touch him with their property. He smiled at the fact that the swordmaster was merciless. But the red-haired girl was not ready to let them go without a fight. The guy with the mustache shouted that she had a very beautiful face, and if anything happened, they would kill her. One of the guys said that he promised to kill her calmly. What they feared most was the whip. He thought that he had to lead them to the right place. Besides, you will have to rely only on the whip. Rizulia must be very strong, and she had no intention of showing mercy to the guys. It was necessary for her to pretend to be weak, but the hero did not want to distract them. The girl thought that if someone lied to her, she would kill them. Suddenly, Hao hit the red-haired girl on the neck. The guy with the funny mustache was struck by the suddenness. He had no idea what was happening. And for some reason, 3 men couldn't cope with the little girl. The Trinity stood rooted to the spot. The one with the mustache shouted for her to kill him. He had to use a technique called the tiger palm. The hero realized that they were caught, but he didn't plan to let the swordmaster go. The hero was delighted. Without letting go of the red-haired girl, he used a technique called the Venetian tiger palm. One of the 3, the stronger one, objected. The girl flew into the air and said that this was not all. She cursed. The swordmaster soared as high as she could. The guy with the mustache swore. He screamed, and after that a wave of explosions spread around. The shock wave reached the boys. The girl threatened to finish off those bastards, and besides, she could still swing a whip. Suddenly, the main character grabbed the girl by the hand. He said he couldn't hold him back. The power of the whip could increase. Thanks to this, the girl could fight with them on equal terms. The guy with the mustache said that she uses different battle crystals, but he felt that it wouldn't end there. What he was most interested in was what to do next. The hero and the swordmaster moved on. It was necessary to stop. The red-haired girl decided that she would have to change her target. The main character held onto a tree like a ninja. Hao Feng said that the monster mountain was too dangerous and large. It would be difficult to find them. Something caught his attention. The swordmaster wanted to know why he saved her. The main character didn't want to be treated so rudely, especially since he saved the girl's life. He simply couldn't understand how the girl alone managed to deal with 3 monsters. The girl looked at Feng, and hope appeared in her that as long as she was with him, there would be no danger. The protagonist explained to her that he wanted to become stronger, and that his only plan was training. The boy replied that he only had experience hunting on Monster Mountain. There were very high-level monsters in this place. The green-eyed girl said that he would most likely die before he became strong. She was ready to offer him one of the options to increase his strength. He was delighted. The only thing that bothered him was that there was no point in such a warrior helping him without a reason. The girl replied that she really appreciated him and the fact that he saved her. As soon as the moon appeared in the sky, he stopped training. Feng felt like he needed some rest. He didn't want to use the crystals just like that. A huge paw stepped onto the grass. The beast growled menacingly. But his attention shifted to something that was far away in the bushes. The red-haired beast reminded Hao that he had no chance of tempering his body with such lightning. The boy grabbed his head. The herbs he had eaten today had run out too quickly. In the girl's eyes, he looked very masculine. And suddenly she commanded him to get ready. Less than an hour has passed. It was too tiring. But the girl had absolutely no strength left. The guy was not prepared for this turn of events. It was completely unclear who exactly became addicted to something like this. At first he wanted the girl to rest. While she was resting, the guy successfully hunted monsters. I even managed to cook a juicy piglet. They began to have dinner. She wondered how long he had been on the monster mountain. Besides, a 6th-level disciple should have had a mentor. Feng replied that he had not learned from anyone. The girl turned to him and said that during the whole day that they spent together, she did not even ask his name. The guy introduced himself. Then she said her name, Qin Yan. She turned to the boy and said that forging the body was not available to ordinary people. The boy understood that this was all thanks to the pharmacopoeia. It seemed he was lucky to meet him. At his current speed, he was bound to be noticed within 10 days. The guy didn't expect that in just 10 days the realm of martial arts would become available to him. Feng thought that this was exactly what the teacher had warned about. Qin explained that the amount of crystals she had to spend on him and help him was too great. The guy realized that she wanted to make him her servant. Several days passed. During this time, Qin Yan was able to triple her strength. The guy shouted that he was not going to die here. It was necessary to prepare for the impact. He was strong enough. Thus, the pharmacopoeia was completely open to him. The girl easily parried the second blow. She grunted. Then she screamed, and she ordered Feng to hold on until the end. Armed with a whip, she began to parry the blows again. The guy tensed up. From the pain and strain, he screamed at the top of his lungs. Such a blow could be seen from afar. Qin couldn't open her eyes. It was so difficult to resist the dust that was created by the impact. The girl was embarrassed. The shockwave swept away everything in its path, including the protagonist's clothes, and a flawless torso with 6-pack abs appeared before it. At that very moment, Hao realized that the realm of martial arts was within his reach. The dust quickly cleared. Qin replied that everything happened too quickly. She walked up to Hao and playfully hit him on the back of the head. She wanted to praise him for becoming a warrior. Feng said he was comfortable. His body seemed to become lighter. He needed to test his strength. The guy's fist rushed forward. He was eager to try out his new abilities. The boy easily broke through the tree with his fist. The guy thought that he could even use tiger techniques. Qin warned him that they did not yet know what kind of power he had received. The boy couldn't believe how lucky he was. Now the lightning whip had no effect on his body. Hao said he would arrange everything. Night soon fell. They found a cave where they spent the night. Qin fell asleep first. However, Feng could not fall asleep. He wanted to talk to the master. The little master, as always, was resting and had no time for him at all. He looked at her as if she were an advanced warrior. It's time to give him some of the formula. Feng said he had waited too long for this. The master said she didn't want to hear it. The boy was surprised. A piece of metal appeared in his hands, which looked more like an unnecessary spare part. Lao replied that this thing had no class. Of course, Feng did not like this. This was part of the formula. Ordinary people might dismiss such a detail as trash, but Feng had warrior-level physical defense. This secret method was comparable to the mysterious knowledge of the heavenly order. Feng felt there was a catch somewhere. Lao replied that he would need a battle crystal, and she won't deceive him. The guy felt the inner energy. He sat down to meditate. The little master guided him and told him that he should absorb the energy of the battle crystal. It was necessary to pour some of the battle crystal's energy into this part. Thus, a section of the formula will open in his mind. The guy's consciousness seemed to shift. His body sparkled with light. He was completely absorbed in himself. He was enveloped in light energy. Suddenly there was a glow. It quickly spread around. The boy felt that the kingdom of emptiness had opened up before him. He managed to open his eyes with difficulty before. He had not seen the magical sign that appeared before him. Suddenly, space began to break. Most likely the magic formula broke matter. His body and mind seemed to be renewed in that second. He didn't understand what it was. The master looked pleased. She was proud that he had managed to overcome himself and break the boundaries of his own capabilities. Even though the formula and the combat abyss combat combination were inextricably linked, He still needed a lot of combat crystals to prevent the formula from consuming him. Feng was determined to avenge his disgrace. Suddenly he heard something. It didn't take a second for him to be ready for battle. Qin was stunned by the sound. It turned out that the guy was just cultivating. Now he looked different. Feng got up early, but was already ready for a new day. Qin said that now he looked like a basic martial artist. She called him a monster incredulously. The boy smiled and said that if he were a monster, he would eat her without thinking. The girl started pestering him and saying that she knew his intentions. A brilliant idea came into her head to get something tasty. She threw him some things and asked him to change. These things were hidden away from the time when she disguised herself as a guy. All the loot fit perfectly, and, by the way, suited him very well. Qin blushed. These clothes looked much more attractive on him. Feng felt sympathy from her. It was necessary to move on. The girl asked why people were chasing him. Qin replied that everything has its time. Suddenly, something knocked them both off course. Feng hugged the girl. She was angry that he touched her without permission. Feng warned that they should move forward silently. He felt that there was someone ahead with a strong desire to shed blood. They stopped for a moment. It was necessary to see who was ahead, and how can they overcome the barrier. There were two men. One of them was saying something about murder. Another said it would be easier to go back and find him a young wife. The guy was unhappy that they would have been replaced sooner or later anyway. Feng said he saw a treasure map ahead. The sun was setting and it was getting on towards evening. The guys wanted to make money more than anything. Qin saw that they had entered inside. The guy said he could smell monsters here. One of the guys shouted that the treasure was nearby. He heard some extraneous sound. He was hit with such incredible force that blood immediately gushed from his mouth. The second one was on guard. He raised his head and became scared. A huge gorilla appeared in front of him, holding his friend in its hands like a toy. The overgrown monkey looked at the second one. All the guy managed to do was scream and start running, but that wasn't enough. He screamed and blood immediately sprayed around him. The monkey began to grin. Feng noticed that the two martial artists were easily killed in just a few seconds. Their strength was at the level of a martial artist. The guy understood that he was no match for him. Qin said she had something in store. The monkey did not move. Xinya decided to carry out her plan. She moved gracefully and quickly. She managed to use the whip. With his help, she grabbed his hand. Qin shouted that she was ready to try the secret technique. The whip pulled him with all his might. The monkey let out a scream, and she exhaled heavily. Feng was indeed not on the same level as him, but he couldn't allow the monster to hit Qin. The girl smiled and ordered him to show his power. She herself materialized the sphere, and she shouted to the monkey that his death had come. The monster screamed, feeling the full force of the blow. The girl smiled and said that everything worked. The guy shouted that this creature didn't know how to fight at all. Besides, Qin had already defeated many martial artists. That would be too much. Feng instantly became hungry, realizing that he had never tried such meat before. The mere thought of the level he could eat made the boy instantly hungry. He turned to the girl and asked her if she wanted to try. Suddenly there was a loud knock. The red-haired girl was offended that he did not appreciate her brilliant fight. However, he understood that she was using a crystal. Its energy was several times higher than that of ordinary battle crystals. He didn't want to feel like he was nobody. He yelled that he simply respected her very much. The girl called him to her. The guy wanted to clarify what was happening to Qin. They reached the cave, but what it hid inside was completely unknown. The girl immediately realized that whoever lived in this place was good at spiritual practices. Something to the side caught her attention. She saw an elegant box containing a treasure. He wanted to open the lock as quickly as possible. However, Qin either didn't hear, or she opened it herself on purpose. She lifted the lid and rays of light appeared from inside. The boys were amazed at what they found inside. The book of the Berserker appeared before him. Feng thought that this book could reveal various secrets to them. Qin turned to the guy with regret and said that he was wasting his fighting energy in vain. Feng replied that she had no right to say such a thing. The girl noted that a lot of effort will have to be put in to achieve success. She reminded that the body could explode. Using the crystal of the demonic beast as a conductor, concentrating it within oneself in order to turn it into a purifying pill. This is the purpose of the technique. However, energy of this level could absorb everything around. A berserker pill is less than 1/10 the power of a battle crystal. If they condense with a lower-level monster's demon crystal, they could even reach 1% of a battle crystal. The girl said that this method was too risky. Their lives were at stake, and this book was complete garbage. The protagonist wanted to know if she possessed the same secret book. Inside the box there was a sheet of paper on which everything was clearly written. The boy was delighted, as the berserker pill was quite useful in improving his strength. Qin giggled and replied that there was another type of power: money. Feng thought that he would have to get battle crystals from somewhere. The guy wanted to try this berserker blood pill technique, but he had no idea if the monkey had any demonic crystal. The girl handed him an unusual object. This is a 4th grade demon crystal. She explained to the guy that if she really wanted to die, she would give him that opportunity. The guy was surprised and thanked his red-haired friend. If she really succeeds in condensing the elixir, she could make a good profit. The book opened, and the hero was enveloped in the light of secret knowledge. The energy of demonic crystals is always wild, so you need to be careful. He needed to follow the line of the berserker blood pill technique. He felt a calling within himself and wanted to trust this power. With the help of several elixirs, the pharmacopoeia helped him to improve. He needed to absorb all the remaining energy. In a moment, everything was ready, but there was no way to lose concentration. In fact, this is exactly how he condensed the elixir. He really is a healer. It's no wonder he was able to remain under lightning pressure for so long. The very same Xuan-class pill appeared in front of them. Qin thought about it. She had never encountered anything like this before. Besides, he is too smart for an ordinary child. The pill was ready to explode in their hands. She expected anything but Hao being a heaven-level healer. The girl got scared. At this time, a stranger appeared. He explained that everything was going as he had planned. There was someone here, and besides, these 2 traitors had no intention of leaving. The girl couldn't believe that he really was a heavenly healer. She was determined, and besides, the boy's personality turned out to be different from what she expected. These 2 traitors did not find the treasure, and most likely ran away. One of the gang said that he did not feel a human aura, and besides, they should not go far. The guy with the mustache thought about what was ahead. The rest didn't know what to expect in the end. However, they suddenly saw dead bodies. The lead armored warrior told them to be on guard. He ordered them not to let anyone stay with them in the dark. Besides, in such a deep cave, anything could await them. Qin turned her gaze forward. The mace was already breaking the stone of the cave. One of those who held the defense understood that it would be difficult to stand against the mercenaries. The red-haired girl was puzzled. This boy was still refining the tablet, and if he was interrupted, the entire process would be destroyed. Qin was scared. This was not how she had imagined the last moment of her life. Feng tried to concentrate and increase his power. The girl understood that she could not give up. She looked at the main character and said that they needed to survive at all costs. At this time, Little Master Lao was thinking that her protege would not give up his life so easily. Besides, the gang is not that big. They wouldn't attack directly. She just needed to use more energy. Qin thought about using a little energy to kill one by one. A glow appeared in her hand. The girl immediately released this light into the wild. The whip instantly wrapped itself around the neck of one of the gang, and then she pulled him along with her. The other 2 said it was most likely just an illusion. The girl looked out and realized that energy consumption was minimal. A figure of a guy with an axe appeared in front of her. She was able to reach him with a whip, something the enemy never expected. He managed to block the blow. The one who was pumped up drew attention to her. He ordered her to come closer to him. The girl didn't expect this at all. Suddenly, the whip fell out of her hands and she was grabbed sharply. A hand roughly squeezed her throat. She was unable to speak. The man said that he could easily find her. He never expected to be so lucky. As payment for the humiliation, he wanted to use her body as payment. The girl was still standing on her feet. Qin hoped that at least someone could save her. Otherwise, she will simply die. There was no sign of trouble. Suddenly, a loud sound caused a flock of birds to fly up. A bright beam pierced the space. The offender Qin screamed in pain. Blood splashed in all directions. The blow landed on his arm. The man with the mustache who had been harassing Qin recognized the guy standing in front of him. Feng hurried to free the girl and picked her up in his arms. A bandit from the gang hastened to avenge the leader. He armed himself with an axe and rushed towards them. The gang leader announced a reward for his head. Qin was numb with horror and surprise. Now Hao was like a hero to her. Hao turned and ordered them to be silent. Suddenly, he gathered all his strength into a fist and headed towards the offenders. The blow was so powerful that it made a hole in the muscular guy. The guy with the mace was ready to stand up for his comrades. Feng had no plans to retreat at all. With one more blow, he knocked his insides out. Feng acted cautiously. The main character needed a few seconds to assess the situation and quickly decide what to do next. The leader started yelling that he was clearly on something and that he should be killed. The girl screamed at him to be careful. But the gang was already fully armed and ready to attack him. The ground began to break underfoot due to such a fierce battle. One of the gang made a few movements. Finishing the fight to the end was the #1 priority. Another armed himself with a sword, hoping that it would help somehow. He rushed menacingly at the main character. The wave from the impact reached the ground in a second. The power swept away and destroyed everything in its path. The man with the mustache did not understand what had happened and why he was still alive. Hao had no plans to spare anyone. Instantly, he did what he had to do, which was to separate the head from the body. Hao froze. Then he began to lose consciousness. And like a sack, he plopped down on the ground. So the evening came, The moon rose so high that its light spread for many kilometers. They found a cave in which they could settle. Hao began to come to his senses. The girl noticed this and tried to talk to him. While he was trying to regain consciousness, she told him that he needed to eat, and she also tried and cooked dinner for him. The guy was holding a fish in his hands. He was wondering how long he had been unconscious and where his things had gone. Qin replied that she washed them because they were all covered in blood. Then she explained to him that after taking the top-rank blood pill, he had achieved martial arts master status in a short time. The girl immediately stood up, and she leaned in extremely close, and her scent made the guy's head spin. Feng was embarrassed and excited at the same time. She needed information about whether he really was a doctor. It took him a couple of seconds to figure out how to answer such a question. The girl replied that she knew he had some kind of elixir or pill with which he could recover. The guy didn't understand how to react to this. Besides, any healer needed ingredients to heal. He approached Qin and began to say that since she understood elixirs, he needed her to get some lotus seeds for him. The girl felt uncomfortable and moved away. The girl screamed at him to stay away from her, then hit him. She replied that she had some seeds in stock for him. Besides, she came here for the 1,000-year-old king of medicine, then made him an offer to work together. He was surprised because he thought it might be too dangerous. First of all, he will receive some rare herbs. Hao thought about it. If he doesn't want it, she can easily find someone else. He had no choice, he agreed. Qin was happy, but the guy was uncomfortable. They decided it would be better to end the day early. The guy needed to go away. He needed to think about how he could quickly improve his skills. Little Hao appeared out of nowhere as always, and greeted him with a question about how he liked his new power. The guy replied that he didn't fully understand yet. However, he had a feeling of his own superiority. Lao was unhappy, and she threw him the inventory. This item could make his tiger power faster. Besides, his body is not that strong yet. It would be better if he had medicine with him. This thing could increase all skills instantly, and they could be used at any time. The body became much lighter, and the blood would circulate faster from the use of medicinal herbs. With a thing like that, he could deal with anyone. Feng thanked the little master. He understood that he needed the red lotus. He had to wait a little. About 10 days passed. China had no specific information. To continue her journey, she had to find her own way. Qin asked Hao to wait. Suddenly a strange sound was heard. Even the trees and mountains trembled. Feng thought it was an earthquake and he needed to hurry. They only had one chance. To catch the king of medicine, it was necessary to move faster. Feng suggested coming up with a plan, but the girls said that it wouldn't help. No martial artist can handle it if they run into him. Therefore, the earth dragon and the huge demonic tiger were the most impressive monsters. They fought among themselves for a long time. The creatures were very powerful. The terrain had changed so much since their time that even a map would have been useless. The girl said that from this distance the king could smell her himself. The protagonist doubted that he would succeed. They moved faster and faster. When they came as close as possible, one of the creatures fell to the ground from the impact. The impact was incredible, so the ground around it began to break. Feng managed to grab the girl in his arms and said that these two monsters were really having fun. However, the distance did not give them the opportunity to hide. They found a secluded spot high up. Qin replied that they couldn't be distracted from their main goal right now. Moreover, they were in a volcanic zone. Suddenly, he remembered that the plant he needed high temperatures, which meant there must be another volcanic zone here. It occurred to him that the plant was most likely growing inside the volcano. However, the volcano woke up and was smoking, and because of the sulfur it would be difficult for him to get there. Besides, there were monsters waiting for them ahead. They had no other option but to continue on their way. However, it was necessary to move quickly and not waste a minute. Something resembling a centipede appeared in front of him. Then a hungry lizard smelled them. Hao and Qin were not supposed to become their prey. A monster appeared out of nowhere and attacked them. A monster that looked like a centipede was moving towards them. The girl was quickly able to scatter them. Feng realized that there were more monsters around. The girl used her most powerful move. The monsters were scattered around. The blow was strong, but they had to move on. Finally, they reached the crater. However, this place was no less dangerous. The monsters had sensed them. In the middle of the crater, they saw a stone platform. Most likely, this was the red lotus of the king of medicine. The temperature was too high, and it would be very difficult to get it out. Feng began to undress. Then he said that he would go into the very mouth of the hole. He concentrated all his strength in his hands and prepared to use the skills of the pharmacopoeia. The girl realized that this was exactly how he planned to protect himself. Besides, the 1,000-year-old king of medicine was worth it. He couldn't miss such a chance. His body became stronger, as if it were clad in armor. Qin realized that this was a thunder martial arts skill. She witnessed how he hid his abilities. The guy moved skillfully in the air. He almost managed to reach the stone platform, but the intense heat made it difficult for him to grasp the plant. He had to choose whether he would receive damage from magma or from the techniques he used. Qin was worried about him. She was not able to cope with such a task. She had never seen the newcomer move so skillfully before. Perhaps Feng had not been entirely honest with her, and had not told her everything about his power. One way or another, he needed to get to the stone slab. Suddenly he heard a voice inside himself that began to advise him to concentrate on his internal energy. Then he ordered to take the lotus and place it in the spatial ring. He managed to reach the plant. The heat was unbearable. Now it was necessary to pull it out. He managed to do it. Suddenly the magma began to rise sharply. Finally, the plant was in his hands, but sulfur began to spread around. Suddenly, the ring that was on his finger began to glow. Feng didn't understand what was happening as the lava spread around. The guy understood that he wouldn't be able to hide from the lava. He only had to make a few jumps. Qin shouted that 2 huge monsters had already noticed them and were approaching. Hao shouted that he had the plant, so he hastened to retreat. However, the volcano was not so friendly and did not intend to calm down. He understood that he couldn't just get out of the crater. The main character decided to use one of the techniques. Energy instantly began to fill the space around. However, his body could not withstand such a load. Besides, the magma wave was very close. The guy could kick the bucket at any moment. Suddenly, a chin whip wrapped around his torso. The girl pulled him towards herself and shouted that she would not let him die until the plant was in her possession. The guy was drawn to her. She smiled at the guy, because if she hadn't been there, he would have definitely died. Feng didn't expect that this girl would save his life. He looked at her with eyes full of gratitude. Suddenly, something distracted him. A demonic tiger appeared in front of him. He found them by smell. Hao was afraid that they wouldn't be able to get out this time. Only a bloody pill could help them. The girl screamed that his body might not be able to withstand it. At this moment, little Lao appeared and reminded him that he no longer had any elixirs. The guy screamed. Along with his cry, the volcano released a stream of magma, and the monster, at that moment, rushed at him. The other monsters also noticed the movement, but the guy didn't want to waste his energy just like that. Unfortunately, there is no other way to defeat them. He grabbed the girl, and he ordered her to try not to fall, but the monster was already moving towards them. A bird was flying towards them from above. The monsters began to surround them. There was absolutely nowhere to run. Feng was angry. Nothing could stop him, but a demonic tiger appeared behind him. Qin warned him of the danger. He moved very quickly, and it seemed that it would leave them no chance at all. Suddenly, a piece of hot magma fell on the monster. It was good that the power of the pill allowed Feng and Qin to move quickly. Luckily, they weren't even touched, but the monster clearly had nowhere to run. The guy and Feng landed. He needed to catch his breath. The girl saw that the guy was feeling bad. He needed to deactivate his form. Otherwise, he could have died. His body looked like it had been put through a meat grinder. Qin had to think of something. But Feng's body was in so much pain that he could no longer hold back and screamed with all his might. First, they had to bandage his face, but the pain did not go away. The torso and arms also had to be bandaged. Qin said she could bring him some water, or cook something to eat. She hugged him and said that she was worried. The girl suddenly pulled away from him as soon as she heard a groan of pain. However, she immediately hit him in the face. After some time, bones remained lying on the ground. Feng came to his senses and changed his clothes. All that was left was to replenish our strength and have a snack. He wanted to know if there was any other way for him to regain his strength. All he knew was that he was different from ordinary people. Qin said that she had never encountered such strength as his before. She wanted to ask him for the same pill. The guy was deep in thought. The girl also snatched her piece and shouted that now she could prove to her father that she would succeed. The main character was amused by this. Qin handed him a piece, saying that she always keeps her word. Now he already had 3 pills. He was very pleased. However, the red-haired beauty's mission was completed. Now she had no need to stay here. It was time for him to go back too. But first, she suggested taking a look at the pharmacist's family. A few days later, they visited the city of Yulan. The main character lived in this place. Qin wanted to know if the main character was afraid that he could be killed in his own city. Hao replied that under other circumstances, he would have been scared. However, now the conversation was about something else. Suddenly, something fell on the guy's foot. The girl reacted quickly and took out a whip. Something was already flying towards them. Several shadows appeared out of nowhere. One of the guys in a mask and cloak said they didn't expect him to survive and bring a stranger with him. The trio replied that they would take care of the cutie he had brought. Feng understood that after what happened near the volcano, the trio were not rivals for him. He immediately activated his combat form, and one of the guys in the mask called him names and rushed towards him. The blow pierced the enemy. Blood splattered in all directions. The protagonist was ready to repel the attack. The masked guy saw Feng and realized that he wouldn't be able to escape from him. He broke through to the level of a martial artist. Hao caught up with the enemy in lightning speed. In one movement, he deftly grabbed his hand. Then for the other. and he struck him several times. The others shouted that it was time to run. Feng couldn't let them get away. What he was most interested in was who could have set them on him. The masked man replied that they were carrying out orders. At this time, Qin appeared. The girl wanted to visit his house most of all. She thought it was a good idea. At this time, in the residence of the Feng dynasty, at first glance, everything was quiet and calm. Everyone started bombarding him with questions about how he managed to become a master. Feng Sr. couldn't believe his eyes. His son was alive. Hao was glad to see his family. His ingratitude should have been forgiven. The family was happy to be together again. Coming soon to the auction house. In the backyard, two people were discussing the mysterious man who was protecting the boy. This man turned out to be the owner of the auction house. He did not know when he would return for the medicines, but if he managed to serve well, then they would certainly make a profit. At the 5th level, he couldn't understand how he could suddenly become a martial artist. The elder of the Wang dynasty thought that the Feng family had secured the support of that mysterious person. The man slammed his fist on the table. Feng Hao literally walked past him. It was clear that they would no longer be able to maintain influence. The dynasty representative wanted to know what to do next, now that Junior Hao was now a martial arts master. Either way, the fans would not be left alone in the city. They trained their mercenaries for a very long time. The bald man replied that they wanted to deal with Hao Feng personally. At this time, one of the representatives of the dynasty ran into the residence. He had urgent news. The leader and elders were ready to listen to him. It turned out that the Hu and Yang families had brought hundreds of fighters from the mountains and were ready to attack them. One of the fans was angry. He turned to the family and ordered them to stand in defense, and the rest to follow him and meet them at the mountain. The protagonist's father turned to his son and asked him and Qin to head to the backyard until everything calmed down. Qin said that she would do everything as he asked. If anything happened, she could easily deal with them herself. Elder Feng caught himself thinking that this girl was several times stronger than their battle crystals. Hao turned to his father and reminded him that there was very little time left. Silhouettes of enemies were already appearing in the thicket, which were rapidly approaching their residence. The bearded man shouted that these two families had no right to set foot on their lands. One of them replied that it was their own fault, since they had provoked them. Elder Feng replied that they also remembered what they did to them. The enemies were ready to start a brawl. The warriors moved forward. Anyone who threatened him and his family had to die. One of them immediately had a sword thrown at his chest and pierced him right through. A fierce battle began. The bearded fans scattered several warriors with fury. The Hu and Yang families immediately noticed a strong rival. He did not want to delay and headed towards him. The man noticed this, but did not have time to react. How a blow was already awaiting him. Senior Feng only managed to shout at him to be careful. He then asked why he didn't fight such a martial artist personally. One of the Hu family members decided that it would be better for him to help. He didn't wait for the battle. It was surprising that two masters united against him alone. Suddenly, Qin blocked his path, calling the balding shorty a disgrace to the family. It hurt him. The body rose up and began to attack Qin, but she deftly dealt with each blow, skillfully wielding the whip. He was puzzled. Apparently he never expected that her strength would be comparable to that of a true master. It occurred to him that she was actually a pharmacist. The man immediately screamed that it was necessary to deal with Junior Feng immediately. His two boys were willing to do anything to carry out the order. One of them shouted that he would finish him off. He wanted to start the fight effectively, so he used a technique called the Thunder Fist. Hao immediately repelled their attack. The bald shorty didn't expect that Junior Feng would be able to block their power so quickly. Another member of the family also did not expect that this would happen. The main character called the next one to him. The bald shorty fell to his knees. He clenched his fist and cursed at the mercenaries. Suddenly, he started shouting that the Feng family had to be destroyed. The idea came to them to disperse throughout the thicket. Feng Sr. ordered everyone else to retreat immediately. The bald man shouted that he would not spare their family. The guy in the wolf skin said they were just following orders. Then he attacked the protagonist's father. Feng Sr. didn't expect the opponent to have such strength. The blow was quite strong and blood gushed in all directions. The main character saw his father and screamed in horror. The enemy bared his teeth like a wolf. It seemed that he had become even larger in size. Suddenly, a golden arrow pierced the space. It was a whip. Qin grabbed his hand. She didn't give the enemy time to come to his senses. She immediately called out to the hero and said that she needed his help. Hao bowed before his father. Junior Feng activated the pharmacopoeia. Qin knew that he possessed great power. A knife appeared in her hand. She already knew who to take revenge on for this. Then a golden sphere appeared, and she attacked the guy in the wolf skin with a whip. Qin did everything masterfully and cut off his hand. The enemy ordered one of his own to get rid of her. But suddenly another blow hit him. In 1 second, his comrade betrayed him. The rest looked as if they had been waiting for this moment for a long time. What interested the new leader most was what reward awaited him for the murder. The shorty got scared. The second representative of the Yang family also didn't know how to react. A mad smile pierced his face. Qin was distracted. She and Hao were ready to fight. The movements were precise and dangerous. Qin barely dodged. The enemy appeared behind her. She needed to come up with some kind of plan. The new leader was already rushing towards her to teach her a lesson. The main character appeared before Qin and began to valiantly protect her. One of the bare-skinned enemies struck Hao, seeming to punch a hole through him. Qin stood still as the boy flew forward from the impact. Blood began to splatter to the sides. The girl called out to the main character. She still had hope that he could still be alive. Feng bent over the ground, completely lacking the strength to get up. The muscle man in the wolf mask was surprised that someone dared to oppose him. Qin hugged the guy. She needed to protect him from certain death. Suddenly, Elder Feng called out to him. Several of the Feng family members were unable to rise from the ground. They had been hit so hard. The man in the wolf mask was glad that he was about to kill the entire Feng family. The girl covered Feng's eyes with her hand. The head of the family suddenly grabbed it with his palm. A glow appeared around. The guy instantly recoiled. The old man made the most displeased face. The enemy thought that there was another great master-level fighter here. The blonde guy turned to her. The girl was beside herself with surprise and rage. The old man understood that now he would have to listen to the girl. A man with a beard and mustache said that he could beg forgiveness from such a girl. In that case, he just needs to shut everyone up. The boys screamed in fear that such a man would not calm down until he destroyed all living things. True, the captain in the wolf's skin no longer looked much like a man in the heat of battle. He used some very powerful moves. Suddenly the old man stood back to back with this beast. The man in the wolf's skin staggered from the powerful energy that pierced him. Suddenly the body fell to its knees, and the sage remained standing. The rest of the Hu and Yang clans were surprised that two such strong opponents clashed in such a quick fight. Baldi understood that they had to run, and they had very little time. Suddenly, the head of another clan member was instantly cut off. The four guys standing behind didn't even have time to object. They would remember this sight for a long time. But it was not to be. The old man soared upward and activated his power again. Scarlet lightning headed in their direction. It is almost impossible to escape from such a technique. The same fate awaited them, death. The elder stopped next to Qin and reminded her that her mission in the Demon Beast Mountains was complete. The guy did not regain consciousness. Nobody knew how to bring him to his senses. Qin turned to Elder Feng and asked him to convey something to Hao. She was concerned about how much strength he would have left to continue fighting. Elder Feng thought that such a strong arts master would not be able to give up so easily. The bearded man gave the family the command to finally destroy the remnants of the Yang and Hu families. Soon, the Feng family dealt with the two dynasties and recovered all their property. And also, the Wolf clan was destroyed in just one night. After all this carnage, the Feng family gained new influence and reputation. The main character began to come to his senses. The mother and father carefully waited for their son to get better. Hao asked for some herbs to have a little snack. The father was surprised by such a request. He expected his son to want something different. The mother got hold of some fresh herbs, but the boy was so weak that she had to feed him literally by hand. A glow began to appear around Junior Feng. Father was surprised. This was usually how a pharmacist's nature was revealed. The Feng family managed to strengthen their influence in the city, and peace reigned in their territory. However, peace is a very fragile thing. Feng knew he needed help. Lao appeared out of nowhere and said that we needed to somehow solve his money problems. She was unhappy with this arrangement. It seemed to her that someone who had so many valuable skills should know where to get money. Hao realized that the master was talking as if he didn't want to give him the money. He soon returned to the city, and some people recognized him on the street. Others usually stick to those they can shake money out of. He knew one place where he could find what he needed. And at the highest level, when he entered the building, he was met by a nice girl. She invited him into a special room. The master was met by a young man in a vest and shirt. He apologized and said that he would have to wait a little. Hao put his hand behind his head and said that the medicine he was waiting for must be of the highest quality. When he saw what he ordered, he couldn't believe his eyes. These spiritual medicines were presented as a gift from the auction house to the young master's family. Hao was grateful. He wondered what he had done to deserve such generosity. The guy replied that the amount wasn't that big compared to the cost of establishing a relationship. Considering they are investing money in a relationship with such a high-level pharmacist, it is their best investment. While the others returned to training, the protagonist was thinking about a way to improve his skills. All his thoughts were only about skills. The hero understood that in such a cruel world, you can only protect yourself if you have strength, power, and money. Besides everything else, he was very concerned about the issue of commitment to other people. His only goal was to rise as high as possible. There wasn't much time. It was necessary to focus on the goal. However, he really wanted to take a walk. The guy took out a weapon and a map. He wanted to try his luck. The next point is the city of Qian. It took 5 whole days to get to the city. Soon he reached the first village. He was immediately surprised that there were too many merchants in the city. It was very strange. It seemed that there was no one else to be found here except traders. He had an idea. This place looked like a den of thieves. Most likely these properties belonged to 100 thieves, which could only enter the city in one way. There were rumors that this territory was captured by hundreds of groups. If the caravan was poorly protected or did not contain valuables, it would most likely meet a tragic end. Hao thought that in this case, his journey alone could be extremely dangerous. It would be better to find a group to join. He noticed a group that was recruiting new members. The guy just received an order from the Yellow Wind. He was going to hire new group members. It was necessary to come up and leave a signature, after which they would be paid 1,000 gold coins. One of the guys said that there was a whole 1,000 gold coins at stake, and the Yellow Wind guys really weren't too greedy. He began to urge them to sign quickly. Many were ready to sign up, but the main character was on the sidelines. First of all, he needed the group to cross the territory of 100 thieves. One of the warriors said that approaching him with such a level of skill was not the best idea. Hao looked down. He had nothing to say in response. The man asked if there was anyone else who wanted to sign. There were plenty of applicants. The criteria were too high, and without advanced martial arts skills, they were better off not even trying. Junior Feng wanted to try. The man looked at him. Then he asked him if he had gone too far, and he advised him to stop fooling around and go home. Hao pretended that he could handle it, but doubts crept into his mind. The man replied that he did not allow himself to simply swing his fists, and offered to endure 3 of his blows. The guy ironically noted that 10 blows at once would be better. The man replied that in that case he wouldn't cry. A sweeping blow flew towards him. Moreover, the enemy was noticeably larger in size. The guy managed to grab his fist. Suddenly they clashed in a duel. The enemy retreated. He needed a few seconds to think everything over. He thought that the main character's strength was enormous. One of the bearded men said that he recorded it. The man accepted gratitude from the main character. He understood that possessing such outstanding skills at such a young age was a mixture of talent and perseverance. Then he turned to the butler. This time he entrusted everything to the butler. Besides, 100 skilled warriors against the bandits. Hao understood that this trade caravan was small, but he could not hire several hundred warriors for a simple expedition. Soon the moon lit up the sky. Hao settled down by the fire. It could not only maintain the desired temperature. A little girl appeared in front of Hao. She introduced herself as Fei Er. She looked timidly at the main character. She then handed him a piece of cloth with which to wipe his face. He ate the meat and invited her to dine with him. An old man approached them and headed towards the lying people. He immediately realized that they were poisoned. If there was poison here, then there must be a poison master. The old man said that he needed to scout out the situation. He ordered the protagonist to protect the young lady. The guy decided to check if anyone was still alive. The poison was of a very low level, and he hoped that he would be able to remove it, thanks to his knowledge of the pharmacopoeia. All that the enemy with the sword could utter was that a traitor stood before him. The guy with the sword looked arrogant. Then he asked why the enemy did not want to earn money together. But he did not wait for an answer and struck him. The enemy only had time to curse his killer. The bearded man said that one should have listened to one's instincts and not trusted just anyone. The guy raised the dagger, but the weapon fell out of his hands. He was discouraged. The old man wanted to know who he was ultimately working for. But he received no answer. The enemy was already trying to escape from him. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed the hem of her clothes. It turned out that the bearded guy was still able to speak. He replied that he had made an unforgivable mistake. Then he said that his death would not change anything, at least globally. It turned out that his wounds contained poison, which he could cure. The old man turned to the protagonist and asked him to use his skill so that he could remove the poison. The main character looked at the guy and reminded him that he was a pharmacist. He touched it and used the power of healing. The bearded man felt unwell. After the poison left his system, he needed time to recover. After a while, he felt a little better. The boy bowed before Hao and began to thank him for the opportunity to live on. He didn't have much time. He needed to continue healing the team urgently. Hao did not hesitate. The guy handled it deftly, even without outside help. The crew members began to vomit poison. The team understood that they would now be indebted to Hao. The bearded man wanted to know what Junior Feng's thoughts were on what to do next. The main character smiled slyly. Then he said that most of those who were hired had already died, so it was unlikely that a large number of people would be sent to this place. All that was required of him was to pretend to be dead, and wait until the fish bites the hook. At this time, one of the guys headed along the gorge. He needed to convey the message from the mercenaries to the master. The 2 warriors who were guarding him allowed him to pass on. When he entered the cave, Mr. Yin was waiting for him. The guy said that the butler Fei was not poisoned. For such news, it would not be a sin to reward the messenger. He didn't receive money but a bottle. It was a special elixir, which he immediately accepted. The boy hoped that he had received an antidote to the poison. He felt ill, and the gentleman said that he had not completed his task to the end. The hooded man watched his guest writhe in pain, then ordered him to gather his men and go after the girl. Only after that would he receive the antidote. The guy tried to object. However, the hooded gentleman convinced him that as soon as he did what he asked, the medicine would definitely end up in his hands. The guy stood up and left the cave, but Mr. Yin had other plans. Of course, the guy risked his life. One of the team armed himself. He held the sword tightly in his hands and smiled. The guy with the sword gave the order to the others to get the antidote as quickly as possible. Besides, it was not at all easy to cope alone. They had no other choice. The medicine was the most important thing now. When the boy returned from Mr. Yin, he was surprised. He thought that there was only one person left alive. Hao sat by the fire with the others. He noticed the enemy. The scarred guy was angry that they didn't even pay attention to them. Suddenly, the messenger recognized the people who were in front of him. At this time, the bearded guy replied that they would cope just fine. The messenger shouted that it looked like an ambush. Suddenly, splashes of blood began to spurt out. A young man with a sword wounded the messenger. At this time, the elder activated the power. He needed to find out who wanted to kill them. The boy with the scar commanded the brothers to listen to him with utmost attention. He wanted to take a few with him. He clashed sword with his opponent. The plan was to destroy everyone. However, the elder said that in exchange for information, he was ready to save the life of his enemy. He couldn't get up for a few seconds. Then he replied that no one had sent him, and that he was ready to part with his life. The bearded man said that such a person would not give them any information. The old man was ready to get rid of him. The main character approached them. He needed to understand what to do next. There was blood in front of him, but it had a strange smell that resembled poison. The guy replied that in order to identify poison in the blood, it is necessary to have knowledge of the pharmacopoeia. Hao was interested in the person who could do this to him. The guy couldn't admit his defeat. He was ready to die at any moment. Hao sniffed the poison and thought it was a skillful mixture that could hardly have been mixed by a novice. Feng sensed an ingredient in the composition that slowed down the poisoning process. The bearded man replied that nothing could go unnoticed. The only thought that came to the main character was that the poison was made by someone who possessed a high level of knowledge. He wondered who could have done this. Unfortunately, at this level of poisoning, death is the best medicine. The others were surprised that such a master could not help him. However, Hao still tried to apply the treatment. He touched it. The guy started coughing up blood. Apparently he wasn't dead yet. As soon as he came to, Hao asked how he was feeling. The guy began to thank him and bow. He expected only death from these people. He was ready to tell them everything, in gratitude for saving his life. After some time, they began to cook dinner over the fire. The bearded man said that a man like a jackal could not simply obey. The elder replied that there must have been a good reason for that. As soon as the moon lit up the sky, the others realized that the master pharmacist was here. The others asked Hao to be more careful. However, a sound came from the cave. The guy with the scar stopped Hao. A man in a robe appeared in front of them. He saw the guy he sent on a mission surrounded by enemies, and he didn't like it at all. The guy replied that he still wanted to live. The gentleman did not answer. A second later, his warriors rushed towards them. The guy quickly parried the blows, but there were several opponents. Despite their number, he easily managed to scatter them. He quickly dealt with them and headed towards the master. The gentleman did not expect to lose his protection so quickly. Besides, he began to doubt that his messenger was too strong for the one he had poisoned with the strongest poison. Suddenly a thought crept into his head. Was there really a real master among them who had knowledge of pharmaceuticals? The guy shouted that only a master pharmacist has the right to work with poisons. They rushed at the guy in the cloak. He understood that there was nowhere to go. Suddenly he started coughing, and he fell sharply to the ground. One of them patted him on the shoulder. He smelled of poison. Unfortunately, it all ended before they could find out who was behind it all. The next morning, the others were already thanking the master for his help. The others said it was an honor to fight for him. Hao thought that he needed a few warriors to accompany him on his journey. He needed to go to Yulan City. Hao said that if anyone was willing to follow him, all they had to do was mention the protagonist's name. However, he did not plan to take anyone with him by force. 9 days have passed. They managed to escape the possessions of 100 thieves, and the master was not alone. The protagonist replied that no matter what, he would continue on his way. By the way, the guy wanted to know about the origin of a girl named Fei Er. The bearded man wanted to know why the pharmacist was not aware of it. He replied that the girl was one of the representatives of the 3 strongest families. A day passed. The city didn't look very welcoming. The girl was glad that they were finally home. At first, they wanted to visit the Fei family's house. They finally arrived at the place. They were greeted by a luxurious residence. The girl climbed into the arms of her loved one. and the rest of the family thanked him for his work. Hao replied that he was glad to be of service. He had to tell about how they saved Lady Fei Er. The elder replied that if it were not for the help of the master pharmacist, they would not have been able to escape from the thieves' possessions. The Fei family representative was surprised by the Xuan-level skill. An unremarkable town has acquired an overly talented pharmacist. The elder wanted to know whether it was worth it to simply forget about those who tried to poison them. The guy replied that there were many people in the city who could hire such a good craftsman. The Pu family had already lost its influence, so it would not be difficult to seize the lead. He wanted revenge for what happened. Besides, he considered them useless. At this time, the messenger appeared. The Fei family sided with the pharmacist. The man in the red robe ordered to do everything so that the two families started a feud between themselves. If he succeeds, the management will allow him to enter the temple. It was a very tempting offer. Suddenly, he remembered something that had happened some time ago. The talk was that in 3 years, revenge for the humiliation awaited him. The protagonist failed to finish him off with one blow. Then he decided that if he didn't implement his plan, he would die on the spot. It was this agreement that the main character dreamed about. He couldn't waste any more time. Besides, his skills were too unstable. When he reached the level of a martial artist, there was a possibility of losing control of his body. The art of emptiness was not given this name for nothing. It could lead to a complete loss of control over energy. He needed to get a battle crystal, the crystal that helped him level up faster. The guy headed to the pharmacist's guild, but didn't know the way. As expected from a pharmacist's guild, a strong aroma of medicine emanated from the approach to the building. Hao wanted to get a qualification to prove that he was a pharmacist. He was met by a completely disinterested man who asked standard and not very interesting questions. He specified what level the young man was aiming for. Junior Feng replied that he needed the yellow stage. The man replied that it was a high rank, but they were ready to begin testing. He extended his hand to the protagonist. He felt his pulse. The man was surprised. Suddenly, he addressed the boy not by his name, but by his title and called him Excellency. Then he bowed and said that he recognized him. The hero assumed that the person in front of him was the elder of the pharmacist's guild. A second later, he realized he had passed the test. The man said that he confirmed his level. He then handed him 300 tinctures of spiritual medicine and a yellow stage pharmacist's uniform. Hao was pleasantly surprised that he received such valuable gifts. Behind him, he saw the butler, who stopped him to present him with a gift. Hao didn't expect anything from the old man. The man wanted to present him with 3 battle crystals. Junior Feng suspected that he wanted something in return. The butler replied that a competition for the position of the city's head family would soon take place in the city. The city's family changes every 3 years, and receives 1 battle crystal as a bonus each year. And also, the power to control the 30,000-strong army of the city of Qian. The elder said that the gentleman promised that if he received these 3 crystals, he would help his family in the upcoming competition. Hao thought that at the moment, what he lacked most was battle crystals. The guy said that he didn't want to disturb him at first. The very fact that the family has a yellow stage pharmacist greatly strengthens the family's position. The elder said that another family was also laying claim to the position of the main family of the city. Moreover, the one who hired the poison master was most likely a representative of the Izu family. The guy didn't interrupt his dinner. The old man said that the fight would begin tomorrow. The next day, the city was ready for the struggle of families. It was necessary to understand where the main competition would take place. A very exotic test with cold-blooded ones was being prepared in the arena. The butler said that the coat of arms of the main family would be hung out as a sign of victory. Hao thought that all the masters would fight among themselves. The pharmacist was absolutely irreplaceable in this field. The protagonist understood that he would need his family's help to strengthen his position. Junior Feng knew that he had the power to change the outcome of the competition. If he didn't have the crystals, he would never have gotten involved in these intrigues. The man in green clothes could not believe that no one could compete with one pharmacist. He said that because of this, he would have to ask outsiders for help. Hao turned to him and recognized the man as the current head of the Izu family. Next to him was a girl in whom he felt the power of a pharmacist. Senior Feng greeted Chief Izia. However, the head of the family went to the master. He bowed and turned to the boy. He said that his family was willing to pay twice as much as the Fei family. He wanted to know how he could be lured to their side. The guy was ready for any reaction. The Feng family representative advised against making such loud statements. The leader heard that they were talking about battle crystals. No wonder the Fei family was so desperate that they decided to give 3 crystals to some child. He shouted that he was ready to give up 6 battle crystals. Hao understood that if he obtained 6 crystals, he would definitely break through to the yellow stage. In turn, this would contribute to the improvement of master skills without any problems. 6 crystals is the price of 2 terms as head of the family. However, he had already signed the document with the Fei family. This would be the deepest act of dishonor. The head of the family understood that they had secured the support of this master. At this time, the footsteps of warriors were heard. They were getting closer and closer. Hao saw the leader of the warrior squad. The head looked intently at the protagonist. The elders said that the commander-in-chief would maintain order during the competition. The Yun family was also involved in this. He didn't expect that their influence had even become entrenched in the army. Apparently, the government was very concerned about this matter. The leader took a few steps. He announced the start of the competition, but he didn't have time to finish, as a crocodile jumped up to him and opened its mouth wide. It's good that he didn't manage to bite anything off. The lizard made a displeased sound. The competition has begun, and it is time to open the gates. The participants ran out into the arena. People and animals clashed in battle. The use of weapons was prohibited. A team without a pharmacist would obviously have been the first to be wiped out, and it was not a fact that anyone would have survived. Hao understood that these guys were too weak and they wouldn't be able to even get close to the crest. He felt uneasy. Everything was happening too fast. Having a yellow stage pharmacist on your team is quite convenient. Hao wasn't going to give in and show them all his trump cards. He needed to move on. He was faced with a clash with an uncontrollable enemy. A beast. He used one of his famous magic tricks. The boy needed help. It's good that he could rely on a companion. He needed to use even more power. The envoy watched the battle closely. He used Lightning Thunderfist. The guy managed to scatter several animals that were near him. The bright lightning moved so quickly across the arena that it was difficult to follow the course of events. From its power, pieces of earth and dust literally rose into the air. He commanded the family warriors to move on. However, the head of Izu did not expect that his family would lose because of some arrogant teenager. Senior Feng began to applaud, seeing that Hao was doing so well. The observer from the Izu family was also surprised that this was possible. Where they managed to find such an interesting fighter remained a mystery to him. The squad leader turned to Fei and asked him to tell him about Hao. It turned out that he was a friend of their family who agreed to help. The commander-in-chief wanted to know what family he came from. Moreover, pharmacists are not a common occurrence. One of the fans said it was a secret. Finally, we managed to get to the coat of arms. At this point, the competition ended and the Fei family won. The next day, the master was offered to stay for a few days. Hao knew he had to move on and couldn't accept their offer. He managed to turn to the younger Fei and asked her to behave well. On the way to their residence, many townspeople paid attention to him. It was not for nothing that they said that people are judged by their clothes. Finally, Hao returned to the demonic beast mountain. He managed to find the cave. The master had to take doping. But first, the guy had to meditate. He needed to become stronger, no matter what. Suddenly, he felt something was wrong. Doping to break through to the yellow stage could not be taken by him at this stage. Besides, he lacked battle crystals. At the moment, he only had 5 battle crystals, 3 of which he had already purified. The hero needed everything to work out exactly as he planned. The sphere in his hands began to glow and exude energy. The crystal's energy was fading more and more. Hao entered a meditative state. There was no way to stop. It was the most powerful thermal energy, which swirled in space like a powerful whirlwind. He needed all the power. A new day has dawned. However, to improve his skills, he needs to feed on the meat of high-ranking monsters. Suddenly, a bear appeared. The beast let out a terrifying roar. Hao asked him why he was yelling, but the beast did not understand his language. The bear stood up on his hind legs and howled again. However, he suddenly ran away from the beast. Hao climbed the tree. The bear tried to break every tree. His sharp claws easily cut through wood. The animal calmed down a little only after it had broken all the trees, but he was overcome by a new wave of aggression. The main character had to use a magical technique. The beast did not expect such a turn of events. Evening came. Hao defeated the beast and managed to cook himself dinner over a fire. With the strength of such a beast, he will easily be able to increase his skill level. Little Lao appeared and noted that his body was in excellent shape now. All he needed was spiritual medicine for the first crystal cleansing. Hao was glad that he would soon be able to purify crystals himself. Lao replied that crystals could only be found in special places. For example, the fire crystal exists in the Burning Lands. The thunder attribute is considered one of the most powerful. Such a crystal can only be cleansed with an ice attribute. Lao suggested to the guy that the crystals could have originated in the Xilan Empire, where an ice city exists. Hao decided that it was time to move now. Lao replied that the crystals would be of low rank. She was ready to give him some recipes for spiritual medicine. First of all, the main character had to collect all the ingredients. Several days passed. Hao almost reached the ice city. It was strange that this city was not as cold as he expected. He even felt a surge of warmth. In this place he had a special advantage. Lao reminded him that as the holder of the Pharmacopoeia, he would be immune to the cold. He was recognized immediately. Of course, no one had any reason not to let the pharmacist into the city. The warrior warned Hao that it was dangerous outside because of the snow monkeys. Hao looked around the city. There was no sign of a pharmacist's guild here. He would have to work hard to get the medicine. Lao reminded him that there would be no cleaning without her, and until he had collected everything he needed. In that case, he will have to look for everything himself. You need to go to the market. It's good that they helped him, and he was able to quickly pick up all the medications he ordered. The merchant tried to sell everything a little cheaper to please the guest from distant lands. He was surprised by such behavior of the northern merchant before. He had never seen anyone who did not want to profit from him. There are only 2 ingredients left to collect. It looks like I'll have to go outside the city walls and search outside. Lao stopped him. There was a danger of running into martial arts masters. Hao was puzzled. He saw a small shop. The door was unlocked. There was a sharp and pungent aroma inside, as if medicine had been prepared here. The man who was inside was not at all happy about the stranger's arrival. He had a long beard and a tired look. Hao asked if he could help him. He then said that in a place like this, they should help pharmacists. The guy assumed he had been poisoned. He recognized the poison as being of fiery origin. The old man replied that he was right in his assumption. The protagonist replied that he was not particularly interested in ordinary poison. The man turned sharply and threw a plate at him. The guy tried to explain that he didn't want to bother him. Besides, the door was open. He could escape at any moment, since the owner was so aggressive towards him. Suddenly it slammed shut. The old man wanted to know who pointed him to this shop. Hao replied that he had seen the place by chance, and that he was a pharmacist who could help him with the poison. The old man thought. Hao began to convince him that he could help him, and demonstrated the power of the yellow stage. The man was surprised. It seemed to him that the young man was from the Temple of Shadows. Hao replied that it was so. The old man was ready to talk to him further. When the man introduced himself, the boy was surprised that in front of him was a bearer of the royal family's surname. The guy explained that his skills weren't very good for these parts, so he needs someone who can accompany him. The old man asked how else he could be of use to him. Then he asked what he would say about the poison. The boy said that first we need to check the pulse. Hao replied that Grandfather Hua was poisoned by a high-ranking chronic poison. It was immediately clear to him that he was trying to slow down the poison's action with ice. It was also immediately clear to him that he had been suffering from this poison for a long time, perhaps for 10 years. The old man replied that for a simple diagnosis there was too much information, and he acknowledged his skill as a pharmacist. The hero replied that he was ready to cure him. But he would have to recover for at least a year. The old man was glad that he would have a chance to survive. Hao was ready to help him, and began the process of removing the poison from the body. The poison began to evaporate. The whole thing took about half an hour. With such an ally, he will not be afraid. Hana began to come to his senses. He was surprised that so much toxin had come out of him in such a short time. The master warned him that this was not all. The old man was glad to have encountered such a young genius, a pharmacist. The next day they set out on their journey. The first thing that happened to them as soon as they got outside the city was a raid by a snow monkey. Hao was scared. He had never seen such creatures before. Moreover, its dimensions were too impressive. The beast was preparing to attack. Hao didn't know what to do. The old man repelled the snow monkey's attack in time. The creature instantly flew away into the snow, and it gave a dying sigh. Old Man Hua ordered him to collect everything he would need. There will be many such animals in these parts. He came across a ring that could help him with the crystal. Grandpa ordered them to move on before they got stiff. Hao was surprised that despite their abilities, they still felt the cold. Most likely the problem was in the crystal. Little Lao reminded him that the crystal's power could be increased. But he will only be able to cleanse such a crystal if the level of spiritual medicine increases. Hao didn't understand what he should do in such a situation. Lao thought that the situation was complicated. The full potential of the lotus must be used. It is necessary to obtain the most powerful medicine. It is not easy to look for medicine in such places. The guy said that I needed to buy a drug with a strong effect in the city. The old man replied that he immediately understood his plan to cleanse the crystal. He then said that he had heard of crystals before. He was interested in what kind of drugs he was looking for. Starkey pointed him in the direction. Hao noted that the journey would be long. The man grabbed his hand. There was a blow nearby, and with a sharp sound, the old man rose into the air. He didn't let go of the guy, and fiery wings formed behind his back. The boy was delighted. Before him stood the legendary master. On his continent, even short flights require a mastery, but he had never met anyone with wings before. By evening they reached their destination, and the guy involuntarily remembered the agreement from 3 years ago. In 2 cities, they did not find what they needed. The old man said that there was another city ahead. Hao heard the name of a city he had visited before. The old man replied that they should visit this place. Hao was ready to go back there again. He was interested in how his family's friends were doing. Soon he saw familiar streets. Nothing has changed here. When they approached the residence, the door was locked. He began to drum and call for his grandfather and uncle. Nobody opened it. There was a crack in the door. A weapon was rushing towards him through it. The guy barely dodged. Old Manhwa cleverly blocked the blow. He pulled the gun. A warrior fell out of the door. The rest of the spears followed suit. The old man dealt with them deftly. The warriors instantly scattered to the side. One of them attacked with a sword. The guy screamed that he would finish them off. A voice was heard nearby asking them to stop. It was an uncle. He immediately recognized his sister's child. The man in the robe hugged the boy. He didn't understand what was happening. And for what reason was he received like that? He saw a representative of the royal dynasty next to the child. Suddenly they were interrupted. Enemies were heading towards them. The elder went to see who had come to visit them. They weren't expecting guests so soon. A messenger came to them to invite them to the wedding ceremony. Hao didn't understand what wedding they were talking about. Uncle replied that there was no talk of any wedding. The envoy replied that the city lord of the Shui family had taken a liking to the daughter of another family. So it was a great honor for everyone to be present at such a celebration. And his master is good enough for their daughter. No one dared to refuse them. Then Hao's hand touched the messenger. He didn't mean to be rude. However, sending the envoy away was the only idea. The messenger took this as an insult. Hao didn't even understand which daughter they were talking about, but their fighting power looked convincing. Uncle replied that he was talking about Liner. Hao couldn't believe it. Memories arose in his head. He realized that they did this against her will. Hao Feng wanted to know who it was. The messenger had no intention of simply revealing names. He grabbed the protagonist by the wrist and said that he would not be able to save the family. Then he warned about the consequences, and he ordered them to save the master. The warriors rushed to attack. The dynasty did not expect such a turn of events. The hero called out to his uncle and asked him to intervene. Suddenly, Grandfather Hua said that he would help them. Suddenly, he activated a protective circle. The wave of enemies threw them back. He made a few magical movements and activated a new spell. The opponents began to bleed. Grandfather Hua's power was truly legendary. The warriors fell near the messenger. He was terrified and didn't know what to do. The hero asked where exactly that man was. The messenger saw the hero and was literally furious. No one dared to threaten him, but he was hit in the leg. He couldn't help himself. The pain was unbearable. The man fell to the ground and began to beg for mercy. Then he said that he was sent from the Shui estate. Mr. Su had his eye on the girl when he visited the city. Hao wanted to know that she was okay. The messenger howled that she was safe. Hao was glad that she was okay. The messenger wanted to leave this place. Suddenly a cloud began to approach him. The smoke began to penetrate into the body. The messenger fell under the spell. It was the magic of a representative of the royal family. There was no trace left of the messenger. Grandfather Hua was ready to move on. There was no time to waste. They needed to get to the capital of the empire. 3 great families fought for power in the city. Uncle warned that the Shui family had always stood out for its influence, and besides, their army was too large. The hero, together with the legendary Hua, set off to the southwest of the empire. A difficult landing awaited them. Many shops operated under the name of the Zhu dynasty. They had been receiving battle crystals from the empire for decades. It was hard to imagine what level of skill they could have acquired. Hao was indignant. He thought that the empire would not allow this. But first I needed to rest. This must be a place where they can remove the poison from their bodies. They began to remove toxins from the body. The man said that the master's abilities were truly incredible. The protagonist responded. They themselves could feel that he was at a high level. Hao said that he could not tell him the essential effect of the red lotus of the medicine king. The interlocutor replied that no one could compare to him in martial arts. The boy bowed and said that he shouldn't worry. Blue Eyes looked at him carefully. The man bowed and said that he was very glad to have such a master. Then he said that no one would know his secret. Night fell on the Shu estate. At this time, the two talked about the progress he was making in managing the city. The gray-haired man said that it was all thanks to the patronage of his lord. His interlocutor replied that since he was a member of his temple, first of all, he wanted to reward him. He threw several golden spheres on the table and said that they valued him so much that they were ready to give him 10 crystals as a gift. The gray-haired man held the spheres in his hands. He was ready to express all his gratitude in this way. The hooded interlocutor replied that he was of benefit to the temple and therefore deserved support. But he should have known that the number of warriors had increased to 50. He stood up and said that all the work for today was done, but there were some points he wanted to clarify. The boy put his hand on the old man's shoulder and congratulated him on his wedding. He laughed that 2 such influential families had given him the honor of being invited to the celebration. Then he took out a small bottle and said that this substance would need to be mixed with wine, and in just 1 day they will be dead. The old man immediately recognized the poison. The hooded man said that even the most incredibly talented craftsman could not make such a poison. The elder bowed before him and assured him that he would take care of everything. He was curious to know what he knew about the Pu dynasty. For some reason, the temple is unable to send people there, so the Zhu family has acquired 3 spiritual martial arts masters. The gray-haired man looked at him. He replied that he would send one of the Su family immediately after the festive banquet. The guy in the robe promised him a reward if he completed these tasks. The old man thanked the gentleman. Suddenly, the elder was called out. 2 people came out. They were eager to find out who it was. It turned out that the hooded stranger was from the temple of the shadow demon. The old man was confused. First, he wanted to know when he would break through to the next level. It would take some time. It has only been 5 years since he reached a high level of martial arts. They knew they would have to improve their fighting skills. The old man replied that they should not show their noses, at least until they reached a certain level. It was necessary to move to another city. The plan was to force the Pooh family to bow down. It was unclear how so many caravans could end up in one city. He assumed that they were unaware, and that the eldest son of the leading family was getting married in 3 days. The representative of the royal family immediately realized that the Zhou dynasty was planning to seize power. The protagonist said that they didn't even respond to the invitation. It didn't matter whether they answered or not. They needed to know everything. At this time in the Du family's estate, the family received an invitation. The gentleman replied that everyone only wants power. He understood all this perfectly. The old man from the royal family rushed forward. He had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. The men were confused. The elder activated his power. His power was very significant. He took a few steps. In front of him was the head of the Du family. The guy with the beard was angry. They couldn't give him just 3 days. He didn't understand why his blow didn't work as hard. No one had ever been so kind to him before. The old man looked at him intently. The rest bowed. At this time, the main character appeared. He wanted to look at his wounds. The main character had to use force. One of the men looked at the boy and asked if he was a pharmacist. These people turned out to be much more resilient than he thought. They couldn't believe that their wounds had just healed. The hero looked at them and said that there was no need to worry so much. One of the men said that even if they came to an agreement with the people, they still wouldn't have enough strength to resist the Shui family. The old man wondered how influential this dynasty was. He lowered his head and thought that he already had 3 spiritual martial arts masters at his disposal. Hao was surprised by such a number of masters. It remained to be seen whether the 2 families would be able to unite and resist such an influential family. The old man understood that the greater their power, the more insolent they would become. He will need to bring the head of the Shar family here. This was precisely the task that lay before him. At this time, Master Shi met. They kindly showed him the way. The master greeted him and introduced himself. The old man ordered him to get up. In that case, it looks like all the major forces will end up in Sue's hands. This meant that the first thing they had to do was deal with their army. The old man called out to the master by name. The men bowed obediently. The old man said that they would be able to replace all the generals of the army with their own people. All that was needed for this was an imperial decree. Soon night fell on the residence. The old man and the main character needed a place to heal a little. Hao said he had reached his limits. Thanks to his treatment, he was restored to the peak of spiritual martial arts. Feng wondered if he had been holding the poison in his body for too long. Suddenly, an idea came to him of what to do. The old man needed a little time. He opened the box and found 2 healing spheres inside. Their scent made him feel relieved. The man couldn't believe his eyes. He became curious about where he got the king of medicine from. The old man was very surprised by such a generous gift. They had dinner and settled down on the couch. The old man turned to the main character. He was still curious about where he got the lotus from. The main character did not understand the question. Without waiting for an answer, the old man fell down to rest. A new day has dawned. Everyone gathered in the courtyard of the residence. It was necessary to discuss further plans. One of the representatives of the dynasty stood sadly in front of the mirror. She held a sharp dagger in her hands. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. It seemed like the girl simply had no other choice. The guy saw this and shouted. He asked the girl not to make a mistake. She screamed that he didn't understand anything and that she had no choice. The guy ordered her to stop. He didn't understand what could have prompted her to do such a thing. He was interested in what she would answer him, whether she would lie or tell the truth. A dagger fell from her thin wrists. The girl sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know what to do next. Soon all the family members gathered. A young man approached the elder to tell him the news. Half a day passed, and it turned out that the Zhou family had been eliminated, and the rest were saved thanks to Hao curing them. It was important to understand that all those who conspired with the Shu family had to be killed. In turn, those who were not involved or were forced into conspiracy had to appear before them. At this time, a messenger appeared with news. He fell to his knees before him and reported that another group of Shui's followers had been captured. One of them turned to Old Man Shi and said that this was already the 5th group. The man with a beard said that it was necessary to see everything with one's own eyes. They gathered in the courtyard of the residence. One of the Jun dynasty appeared before them. The others were surprised that he was able to reach this city in just 3 days. There was only one explanation for this. They were definitely related to the Zhou dynasty. The bearded man shouted that such a family should be thrown behind bars. An old man from the imperial family intervened. He shouted that they could not be arrested. The warriors obeyed. Soon evening came. Hao apologized for being late. He understood that the girl had gone through a lot of suffering. There was a knock at the door. Junior Feng didn't wait for anyone. The old man saw the guy and asked where the girl was. Feng could not understand how his grandfather ended up here. The old man turned to Liner and said that he had come to take her home. The protagonist thought that if he hadn't met his grandfather, he wouldn't have been able to find the necessary ingredients. Who knew how all this could have turned out? This time, thanks to Grandpa Hua's help, he managed to prevent a real disaster. But when he was alone, would he be able to protect everyone? He thought that he would have to become much stronger. But for this, he would need crystals. Several days passed. There were 3 important points in the provinces of the Jilan Empire. Now that the Shui family had been neutralized, the place of the last support would be taken by the Chong family. An old man from the imperial dynasty asked who was ready to take on such responsibility. The rest answered that it was an honor for them. Hao replied that all the other great clans had spiritual level masters. The old man said that he didn't need to worry about it. He would sign a decree to accept 3 disciples from the Chong family into the capital academy. Reaching a high level was only a matter of time. He thought that Liner could undergo training. Hao thought that thanks to this, the girl would be able to defend herself. By evening, it was necessary to appear at the post of the shadow cult of the empire. The cult leader was furious. He couldn't understand how the information had leaked. 3 spiritual masters and 50,000 warriors were lost in just 1 day. They spent a huge amount of time and resources to build their reputation. One of the followers approached the elder and asked what happened to the Zhou family's daughter, who was taken away by force. The elder replied that no one would voluntarily get involved in family intrigues. It all boiled down to the fact that they simply lost the Zhou family, and with it, power in other cities. By the way, one of their men managed to penetrate the residence of Marshal Seelan, and now he was waiting for an opportunity to poison him. The elder said that he would have a task for such a devoted follower. Soon they reached the icy wastelands, in which serious battles took place. They clashed in a sword fight. One way or another, no one understood how exactly the information about the crystals had leaked. But now masters from all 3 empires were flocking here. If things continue like this, war between the empires is only a matter of time. Hao replied that this disinformation would not be spread without reason. The old man replied that he must stop this carnage unless someone got hold of the crystal. Hao replied that stealing the crystal from under the noses of so many masters was no easy task. Based on his observations, the crystal should fully complete its amplification within a couple of days. Considering how many strong masters there are here, even Grandpa Hua will have a hard time standing up to them. Therefore, it was necessary to ask the master for help. Little Lao said that Hao himself understands everything. Hao should approach a boy named Hua, ask him for battle crystals and keep them ready. A little time passed. Junior Feng had to meet with the master. Hao knocked on the door. He had an important conversation ahead of him. The guy knew that the more crystals, the better. Hao wanted to know if the master could give him some more crystals. The old man threw him about 15 of them. The master threw him about 15 pieces. Grandfather said that it would be better for him to disguise himself so as not to get into further trouble. The protagonist thanked Grandfather Hua and said that he needed to hurry into the depths of the icy wastelands. Grandfather Hua said that they needed to hurry. Several days passed before they reached the icy wastelands. The journey was dangerous, as some countries on the continent had accumulated too much malice and envy. Hao saw the battle and realized that there would be a battle for every bottle of elixir. Feng turned to Grandfather Hua and said that such conflicts unfold every time a crystal appears. They hoped that a new crystal would appear before them. An iceberg appeared in front of them, and they were covered by a wave of snow. Suddenly a wave of snow moved towards them. The soldiers were covered so much that they were stuck in the snow. A winged figure appeared in the air. It took a little time for the snow to settle. Some of the warriors would never be able to get out from under the thick snow. The masters flew in to find those who might still be alive. The winged ones saw a hand under the thickness of snow. It was the first time the protagonist had seen so many spiritual masters. He was sure that among them there were several masters of ancient martial arts. Hao was perplexed. Little Lao appeared and saw something coming out of the ground. He did not understand what to do. Master Lao asked him not to rush. Haste in this matter will be tantamount to death. The old man shouted to the master to be more careful. The crystal began to burst out. Hao didn't know what to expect. Pieces of ice began to fly in different directions. They couldn't believe that a crystal was being born in front of them. A crystal materialized in the air. The crowd of warriors rushed forward. Everyone would like to get their hands on a crystal like this. One of the winged masters extended his hand to him. A powerful blow awaited him. which literally cut him in half. The bald man was very hostile. The crystal was meant to belong to only one. He didn't understand what to do. While he was thinking, he was immediately frozen in ice. It happened so quickly that he only had time to open his mouth in surprise. The warriors rushed forward. They were very determined. However, the closer they got, the faster they became encased in ice. They didn't immediately understand what had happened. Such a crystal-absorbed special energy. It was the icy energy of the earth and sky. As soon as they got close, there was a high chance that he would suck out their fighting energy. The warriors heard the noise. They couldn't figure out what it was. Ice monkeys were running towards them. Hao understood that these monsters were very agile and dangerous. One of the animals, the larger one, was already rushing towards them. The bald man only had time to open his mouth in surprise. There was a thumping sound in the air. The snow monkeys attacked several warriors. Hao asked the old man why the animals did not climb the mountains. Most likely they were waiting for their king. A familiar figure appeared nearby. Hao realized that the king was approaching. He was beside himself, and he moved quickly through the snow. He began to defend his stage. His wild eyes looked at the protagonist. It seemed to him that his power was not inferior to the masters of ancient martial arts. This monkey originally had an ice attribute. It was necessary to understand whether he was absorbing the power of the crystal. Most likely, he will be able to break through to the stage of martial arts dominance. But this required some effort. The winged master shouted at him, "How dare he!" Such a creature did not deserve leniency. The master shouted at him to stop resisting. The creature threw a thick layer of snow at him. Hao was surprised that the Monkey King behaved like this. The wave of snow rose again. These monsters scattered the masters like little children. It won't be easy to fight such agile creatures. The monkeys went wild. Under pressure from several ancient martial arts masters, even the Ice Monkey King will have a hard time. The crystal appeared in the air again. It was glowing brightly. The crystal was ready to disappear. Once the mountain swallows the crystal, no one will be able to pull the crystal out. Hao didn't know what to do or how to proceed, since the iceberg had to part for that to happen. The monster hit the warrior across the cheek with a backhand. The Monkey King roared menacingly. One of the warriors saw the brawl in the distance and decided that they definitely couldn't cope without him. The animals rushed towards him. The warriors were forced to meet them in battle. A fight began. The weapons were of little help. They were afraid that the crystal would fall into the clutches of the Monkey King. Little Lao appeared and asked him to show her the battle crystal. Hao was surprised to see her. He was curious whether crystals would help him in a similar situation. More than anything, he wanted to trust at least someone. The old man thought about this incredible aura. It didn't just happen that such a young man had it. Suddenly, the hero lost control of himself. There was no point in resisting. The warriors stopped. The beast also stopped attacking for a few seconds. Spheres began to appear around the main character. One of them appeared in the air, and it began to glow brightly. The protagonist appeared in the air surrounded by flames. Little Lao ordered the boy to prepare more crystals for him. Such a quantity of crystals was a waste. Hao was determined that he would reach such a high level sooner or later. The masters were alarmed. They decided that he had to be caught at all costs. However, such a maneuver would look very stupid. The old man did not expect that the boy was so talented. He caught himself thinking that such a talented person could not have just appeared in this world, especially in this place. The Empire was very lucky. However, the monsters continued to pursue the warriors. The masters hovered high above them. A hand appeared in front of them, and they stopped in bewilderment. It was a thunderpalm. Her blow sent huge snowdrifts flying into the air. After a while, the snow settled. The Monkey King asked them if they wanted more. He immediately headed up to the very peak of the mountain. The main character was ready to show him all his magical power. The palm turned into a fist and hit the ground with a spin. The animal was literally pressed into the snow. No one before at such a high level. Hao himself was surprised that thunderous power came from his hand. Since the master, even in this state, possesses such enormous power, then his true strength may be even greater. Lao replied that she found the show too boring. Besides, he looks too pathetic. The guy was still standing surrounded by energy. His hands emitted golden lightning, which he directed into the ground. Hao was ready to show his strength. The crystal burst out. It happened suddenly. The protagonist's ring lit up. He felt a new surge of strength. They had come a long way, but in the end, they had never seen anything like it before. One of the warriors said that they were just lucky to survive. The old man said that they could leave this place. He spread his wings and headed forward. He managed to soar high into the sky. After some time, he moved to a new location. He landed easily. Lao replied that she had converted the crystal's energy into her own, but the power was nothing compared to his true strength. She thought that he would need 1,000 crystals to unleash his strongest attack. 1,000 battle crystals for one powerful blow. Lao replied that the crystal was now in his ring. Once that man returned, they would be able to cleanse the crystal. She reminded him that no one could protect him from the monsters. And then it evaporated. At this time, Grandfather Hua appeared. He was outraged that the master could hide such a thing from him. The 5 ancient martial arts masters and the Monkey King were about to break through to the dominance level of the spiritual master crowd. Hao thanked the old man for his help. Some measly 15 crystals could not possibly have caused such enormous power. He informed the master that they could begin cultivation and no one would disturb them. Feng wanted to know he better concentrate. The guy was ready for meditation. At this time, the shadow cult's post in the empire gathered again to discuss the news. That's right. Even though they couldn't confirm the death of the Monkey King, what happened to the iceberg was absolutely true. He was angry that someone with a high level of dominance had appeared. Those 2 in robes were not from their temple. There was a student who had recently joined the temple. There are no traces of cult teachings. This meant that they had no connection with the temple. Not a single task was completed properly. There was no point in keeping him alive. They wondered who it was. Who could go against the temple? Another monster opened its mouth. The old man frowned with displeasure, and he began to attack him. A week has passed. His body was able to withstand the crystal's purification throughout this entire time. Lao was wondering when exactly the boy who was trapped in ice would wake up. Most likely he will have to help again. Little Lao didn't understand what she needed to do. Suddenly the ice broke up. The guy replied that he had managed to break through and reach the intermediate stage of combat skill. Lao replied that all the efforts were not in vain. Power began to emerge in his hands. He felt her power and strength. He needed to get outside as quickly as possible. The old man continued to think. He was distracted by the strong aura he felt. He wondered if the boy would be able to cope with such unbridled power. The guy screamed that he finally got his attribute. Finally, he got his own. It would take about a year for him to fully recover. If this is his sincere desire, then so be it. Hao spent all his time on the mountain with the monsters. He spent every minute training, learned to survive and hide from animals. The hero did not see the difference between a beast and a monster. More than 10 months have passed. One of those terrible days. Junior Feng decided to do something special. He jumped off the cliff. A soft landing in the bushes awaited him. He was ready to attack the tree with all his might. He managed to use the thunder cut. This made the earth tremble. He wanted to go back. The blow split the tree into 2 halves. He approached his grandfather and asked his opinion. Even among masters of the great martial arts level, only a few were capable of inflicting such damage. Hao was already ready to move on. A new day has dawned. Hao continued to treat the old man. He reported that he had completely removed the poison. The man couldn't believe his ears. He wanted to thank him for his help. He was a little embarrassed that the old man called him master. It was a little confusing. From that moment on, the old man was ready to call him little brother. What he was most interested in was where he was going. The boy replied that he needed to go to the academy, and his grandfather was also on his way there. Hao didn't mind going with him. Wings appeared behind his back again. He grabbed the guy and rose with him high into the sky. There were only a few days left until the end of the 3-year agreement. In this case, he will be of lower status. He'll make him pay his dues soon. As expected, they arrived at the capital of the empire. There were still a few days left before enrollment. The old man wanted to know if Hao would mind staying with him for a while. The guy agreed. The door to the house opened. An elderly man opened the door for them. The grandfather replied that 10 years had passed, and apparently he was unrecognizable now. The old man fell on his knees and said that he was very glad to see His Highness. The old man lifted him by the arms. He thought that because of the poison he was no longer alive. The world is too cold and cruel. Besides, several years have passed since no one came here except for Marshal Yun. The old man pretended not to understand who they were talking about. It turned out that it was Grandpa Yunying himself. The old man replied that nothing had been heard from him in recent months. Something happened at his estate. The representative of the imperial family replied that he understood everything perfectly. He asked him to prepare a room for Brother Feng. Moreover, before enrolling in the academy, it was necessary to stick together. When he mentioned family, he was clearly concerned. The fiery wings of the old man from the imperial family spread wide. He needed to ask someone. Soon he arrived at the place and was met by warriors. He quickly scattered them. The warriors shouted that there was a stranger in front of them, and he should be punished. He had no right to appear in this place. The old man said that he needed to see the owner. The prince appeared behind the warriors. The old man recognized him immediately. The prince turned out to be the leader of the squad. Then he bowed his knee and greeted the royal person. Grandfather Huya looked closely at the warriors. This detachment was the Empire's trump card. They wanted to meet the old man. The prince reached out his hand to the old man. The old man recognized him immediately. The boy pleaded and asked to save their marshal. The old man did not understand why tears were streaming down his cheeks. The marshal was poisoned. The man tensed up and ordered him to show him where he was. Suddenly, the sound of clattering dishes was heard. It turned out that he had also been given poison. A voice came from behind the door that he would not allow himself to be sent to the grave today. The man behind the door was furious. The old man was ready to enter. Yunxiong met him. He was very glad that his old friend appeared before him. The old man smiled at his old friend and asked the others to leave them alone. Enro also appeared in front of them. She replied that she couldn't just leave them like that. The old man lowered his head sadly, and he asked the girl for a cup of tea. Grandfather Enro said that his friend was acting too suspiciously. His Highness sat down next to him and said that he had heard about the poisoning. He wanted to know if he had already contacted the pharmacists. The man replied that he had already tried everything, but there was absolutely no effect. There was a possibility that he was poisoned in the same way. He realized that since his old acquaintance was in front of him, and moreover, safe and sound, he had somehow managed to escape. The old man replied that the poison had completely left his body. The man screamed that this couldn't be. Was there really any way to save himself? However, there was one problem. The man's mouth opened in surprise. Even though he had been helped to overcome the poison, he doubted that he would be able to recover so easily. The old man replied that he knew him too well. He said that he came to find out who the man was who dared to answer his savior. The man screamed that no one would dare to behave like that. If anyone dared to make fun of me, they would be in trouble. He replied that he had not earned the title of marshal for nothing. Most of all, he hated rich bastards. The old man took a sip. He knew that his combat experience was undeniable. He flew out of the room and asked everyone to gather. Half an hour passed. He wanted to find and punish the culprit. Everyone stood there in bewilderment. They had enough of what they had done here. They needed to return to the house. The man literally went crazy. They needed to find the culprit. Besides, he still didn't know who was behind all this. He would never have thought that such a scoundrel would appear in his house. The old man put his hand on his old acquaintance's shoulder and invited him to discuss matters of life and death, and he assured him that he would never let him die. At this time, in the best academy in the country, this time, to pass the exam, it was necessary to obtain the title of martial arts master. The academy allowed only 1,000 people to enroll this year. Everyone gathered and the people began to chant. Hao didn't understand why everyone was so excited. The doors opened and one of the academy directors came out to them. He was the vice president of the academy, the only one who mastered all levels of ancient martial arts. First of all, he wanted to greet everyone, and he announced the beginning of the opening ceremony. Their academy focuses on training the most talented people, regardless of their status. First of all, he wanted to know who the martial arts master was. Many raised their hands. The vice president turned his force on them. He chose the best, and he congratulated them. Then he announced that the recruitment was open to everyone else. Hao thought that he wouldn't be able to stand out among so many people. First, it was necessary to pass the test of refining combat energy. The cleaning was divided into several stages. If at least someone can do the cleaning at least at an average level, then the test will be passed. The observer snapped his fingers, and he announced the start of the test. The altar informed which of them was capable of carrying out the cleansing, and of course he reported on who would be able to go further. Hao watched the test carefully. It was the first time he had seen such a selection method. The masters asked not to rush. Several young men were discussing an offer they couldn't refuse, including the grandson of the empire's prime minister. In turn, the grandson behaved very freely. Ahead he saw the beauty Shinner. She stood alone and turned to the call. As soon as she saw who called him, she hurried away as quickly as possible. She wanted to have a look around and went for a test. The guys didn't expect to see such a beauty at the academy. Hao also saw a familiar face. He had a feeling that they came to admire the beauties, and not to take a test. Shinner also noticed him. She understood that if he didn't show up, she would have to wait a whole year. The Prime Minister's grandson wanted to know what he was looking at so intently. As soon as he saw the girl, he immediately rushed after her. He asked her to wait. The main character immediately noticed that there was a tail behind her. Lao, who appeared next to the main character, said that there was no need to worry. Hao was glad that the girl remembered him. Suddenly, they called his last name. He wanted to start the test. His palm approached the altar. A glow of incredible power appeared before them. Feng turned to the inspector and asked whether he had passed the test or not. The instructor replied that his level was very low, but he was passing. The protagonist thanked him, but he felt like something was wrong here. Most likely his true level is much higher. He asked how old he was. Hao provided the instructor with all his information. He was surprised by his age and title of master. He assumed that his abilities were different from others. The instructor reported that the guy passed the test. The next day at the academy. In order to successfully pass the second test, they need to defeat their opponent. The applicants were ready for a new challenge. The first battle began. The enemy had to be defeated in the presence of everyone. Hao didn't understand why he should be allowed into the ring. The opponent that Hao will fight next has been announced. The guy began to prepare for the fight. A guy came up to him and asked what happened to him. If Hao loses on purpose, he will owe a decent amount. But the main character didn't answer. The guy got angry and said that he would show him what he was capable of. The fight was supposed to begin immediately. Hao stopped him. He was ready to settle for 1,000,000. Then he said that he was ready to defeat him with one blow. The enemy shouted that he was too self-confident, and he wished him death. The protagonist easily stopped his blow with his fist. The guy didn't understand how this was possible. He didn't let go of his fist. The enemy pleaded. He began to thank him for saving his life. The vice president took notice of him. He said that selection for such a guy was a waste of time. The instructor replied that he had been accepted into the academy. The guy couldn't believe he had passed the test. It looks like he will now be learning from an instructor. Hao thanked him. The man invited him to follow him. The guy saw a very beautiful place, where he already imagined his training. Little Lao appeared out of nowhere and said that there were alien crystals on this campus. Hao wanted to know where exactly. Master Lao replied that he should calm down first. They were supposed to be in the southeast direction. The little girl was afraid that everything was not so simple, and they would not be able to simply obtain the alien crystal. Master Lao asked if he wanted to get it. She asked him not to blame her for not reminding him of herself. With his current physique, the result would be excellent. Lao suddenly began to rejoice. Hao was scared. The fusion of various attributes of alien crystals is much more terrible. She said that she was previously at the level of martial ancestors. She said that there are countless crystals in this world, but you have to be careful when looking for them. This was his place where he would stay. The instructor told him the room number. The next morning, with his talent, it was not difficult to rise to the level of martial spirits. There were only a few months left. There was no chance of winning. Yunying was an ice semblance. His attack attributes would only be useless against her. Hao knew that if he wanted to win, he had to be upgraded to the maximum combat level. The only way to find the crystals is to head southeast. He wanted to go out and see with his own eyes. A wall appeared in front of him. There was no way out. It seemed that the people of the Feng Academy had learned of the existence of alien crystals. He came closer, and it seemed to him that there was something inside. He had no idea what this place was, or who these people were inside. There was no one to ask here at all. At this time, in the square of the academy, which the teacher spoke about, it was ready for battle. Behind him, the guy heard a request to stop this guy. He overheard a snippet of conversation about someone wanting to hit on his sister. The voice he heard seemed suspiciously familiar to him. He came closer and saw a scuffle. If the guy was crippled, it would be bad for everyone. The guy tried to defend himself with his hands, but there were many more guys who attacked him. They were merciless and kicked him to death. He didn't know where to go. Suddenly, lightning pierced space. The force of the impact sent them flying in different directions. The wave from the impact threw them back a decent distance. One of the hooligans asked the main character who he was. The boy bowed and thanked Hao Feng. Hao recognized him as his cousin and hoped that he would recognize him too. The main character thought that he had apparently changed a lot since then. The cousin yelled that he didn't expect to see him at the academy. Hao didn't understand who was standing in front of him. Just a bunch of rich trash. He understood that they could plan something mean and force the girl to marry. A magical glow appeared around him again. He warned him not to interfere in his affairs anymore. Hao said they wouldn't get away with it that easily. The main character did not understand how this was possible. The guy who appeared in front of him easily recognized him. Hao said he was giving them half an hour. The rest started running. The cousin replied that he was dragged into this for a reason. The guy shouted that Hao had no idea what his opponents were capable of. At this time, an armed detachment was marching towards them. Everyone fell silent and turned towards them. There were 3 people walking ahead. The guy grabbed the main character by the sleeve and shouted that he needed to run. To do this in Fenyu Academy, this guy must have influence behind him. Hao put his hand on his cousin's shoulder and said that he never liked trouble, but he didn't intend to avoid them either. He saw a guy named Bao Hai. He became curious about who was in front of him. Hao ignored his question. He replied that he was not looking for trouble. Moreover, anyone who stands in his way will suffer from his power. The enemy did not expect such a reaction to his question, and easily stopped his blow. The guy suddenly flew to the side. Feng turned his attention to the boy. With one move, he defeated one of the top 10 masters of the Outer Academy. The guy thought about what he looked at his energy. Then he replied that if he ever heard about him mocking others, he would kill him. Feng said goodbye. The enemy was unhappy that he was publicly humiliated. He couldn't forgive that. He cursed and ordered him to die. Cousin warned Feng about the danger. The hero felt the attack. His ring began to glow. Then he activated his power. They clashed. Bao attacked stealthily from behind, but his blow failed. The enemy used a flaming fist. Hao repelled it with 1,000 lightning fists technique. But their tactics were the same. They met fist to fist. Bao flew to the side, and he landed abruptly next to his gang. A sharp blow to the chest awaited him. Hao asked who wanted to join him. The rest didn't understand what was happening. An inspector came out to them and said that he had not given permission for the battle. Hao replied that if it weren't for the instructor, he would have destroyed him. Next time he won't let him get away with it. Bao thanked him for sparing him, but he decided not to give up and to strike. And again, he vilely attacked him from behind. Feng didn't expect to fall into Bao's clutches so foolishly. The guy staggered. He didn't know how to react to this. It was clear that Bao just wanted to kill him. Hao knew he wouldn't stop. He decided to attack him again. Hao wouldn't be able to parry the blow this time either. The blow of 1,000 fists fell upon him. The guy parried the blow again. He fought with all his might. The instructor saw this and ordered him to be taken to the medical center. He told the rest to leave. The teacher recognized his protege. The instructor approached him and intended to find out what was going on. He wondered whether he knew his enemy or not. The instructor said that now everyone would have problems because of him. Hao said he would take care of himself. He was much more concerned about the fate of his cousin. In addition, they must ensure their safety. Hao arrived at the prince's palace. He was met. He was being followed. Weren't there rumors that his royal majesty was more than just a child? The guys started moving across the rooftops like parkour athletes. The old man from the imperial dynasty was dozing. Hao interrupted his thoughts. He wondered if he had succeeded in doing what he had told him to do. The guy shared that he was accepted into the academy. He was worried and wanted to help him somehow. A minute later, they were already chatting pleasantly over a cup of tea. Grandfather thought that the best option would be to take control of the Yun family. Although he did not have much influence in the capital, he was able to deal with the Bao family. Feng wanted to know what he could do. The old man replied that he could not let him in on the full essence of what was happening. Initially, the capital was a living hell, and no one dared to commit any atrocities. This Bao Hai he was talking about couldn't do anything good. Hao wanted to know what could have happened. However, he had not yet said goodbye to life. The old man said that he had been poisoned and was on the verge of death. Feng was surprised. The grandfather turned to him and said that he had an idea. He would go to the palace and try to help. When he approached the palace, he was met by a detachment of warriors. The grandfather showed him the prince's order. The warriors acknowledged his strength and bowed. Grandfather ordered to send them a message and inform them that Hua Yun had returned. The king of the kingdom came out to him. He was interested in why the guest had come. He called the old man uncle and invited him to talk in the palace. The king sat down in the throne room. Grandfather took a sip of tea and closed his eyes blissfully. The king wondered what had happened to his body. He replied that his poisoning had passed. He was curious about the reason why he thought he might be poisoned. The king wanted to know how he got rid of the poison. He assumed he had found an Earth-level pharmacist. There are still some problems on his side. It is still a matter of speculation whether the members of the Yun family are enemies. The king was ready to listen to his important question. He is saying that the amount of blood spilled should be a little less. Well, back then, the Han family was tyrannical and self-serving. Emperor Taisong rebelled and overthrew the Han family, but then ruled the world with benevolence. After the dynasty had ruled for many centuries, the kingdom finally shone. Grandfather wanted to know if there was anyone with the last name Bao. He asked the king to overthrow the princess and expel her from the capital. If he doesn't do this, he's in big trouble. The king wanted to know from his grandfather what the Bao family had done. He replied that it was because of one person who saved his life. The king could not believe that the Bao family could treat the doctor badly. In addition, the princess's younger brother took advantage of his affection for his sister by intimidating the members of the academy. Soon the princess arrived. However, the king did not know what to do. He just needed to know about this doctor and not bother him. Grandfather replied that if they wanted to do something useful and send soldiers to protect the Feng family, this would cause rather unexpected consequences for them. All that remained was to talk to the princess. At this time, in her mansion, the grandfather replied that it was not difficult for him at all. Hao wanted to know what poison was used to poison Hades while he was alive. The grandfather replied that this guy named Hades was a good guy. He was born into a simple family, so he hated the rich. Besides, he shouldn't be angry with him. Feng replied that he did not understand why he should be angry with someone he had never met before. He was a little perplexed. Perhaps it was the Yun family, and so it turned out. It seemed that Elder Hua had already guessed everything. He only needed to accept his gratitude. Hao lowered his head and said that he would not forget this favor. Unfortunately, he had to hurry. The grandfather closed his eyes and said that now he needed to go his own way. The main character was not going to give up and was ready to do everything to restore his good name. The first thing he did was return to the city. An auction house appeared before him. The first thing he heard was a call to buy medicine. It turned out that he had no money at all. Several guys were running forward, shouting for everyone to move aside. The owner of the auction house shouted at them to take the wounded man to the doctors. Feng didn't know that there was a doctor's guild in this city. It turned out that they were carrying the former owner of the auction house. He thought he was ready to go to the doctor's guild and find out if his help was needed there. Soon, in the doctor's guild, Several guys appeared. One of them was in tears. He asked him to save his father. The head of the doctor's guild said that he was ready to examine the patient. Unfortunately, he immediately realized that his former owner could not be cured. The boy asked the chief to save him. Even the royal physician cannot cure such an ailment. Usually a person dies very quickly. Literally within an hour, the heart can't take it anymore. The boy couldn't believe that his father would die before his eyes. The rest stood in bewilderment. At this time, someone volunteered to help him. The guy couldn't believe his luck. Academy adept Feng Yue appeared in front of him. The guy asked if he could cure his father. Feng decided that this needed to be tested. Suddenly, a hand stopped him. The man with a mustache like a catfish asked How if he was a pharmacist. The main character said that he had a pharmacopoeia. He immediately used all his strength, and he said that he had an advanced yellow rank. The man said that such a doctor could definitely cure any disease. The main character turned to them and said that he could try to help him. The auction house owner's son shouted that he should try. He didn't want to delay. Hao put his hand on it. The ring activated the energy of the pharmacopoeia. The rest couldn't figure out where to get the medicine. The man's mouth dropped open in surprise, and he said that in front of them was a solar-ranking doctor. The hero directed all his energy towards the patient. The owner began to breathe heavily. His heart started beating. They couldn't believe that this was possible. The man began to show signs of life. Yusak was convinced that this guy was much stronger than they thought. Only very high-ranking officials could afford a doctor of such a high level. The son of the auction house owner said that his father was indeed saved. He was wondering who this guy was. The protagonist's body weakened. Hao replied that he needed monkey fruit, red peony flower, and chuansheng rhizome. The mustachioed man stopped the tavern owner's son, and he ordered his guys to bring him something. A basket of fruit appeared in front of them. Hao reached for one of them. He hasn't eaten normal food for so long. The rest couldn't understand what the hell was going on. Hao bowed. Now he feels much better. He tensed up so much that even his abs showed through. Then, he activated the energy of the pharmacopoeia. The owner began to breathe again. The fruit basket was still full of delicacies. The protagonist exhaled, feeling that he had spent more energy on healing. The tavern owner's son asked the protagonist to save his father by any means necessary. Once Hao convinced him that his father's life was not in danger, he calmed down a little. However, in order to completely cure him, Junior Feng needed a few more ingredients, and as quickly as possible. The guy shouted that he would do anything to get the ingredients he needed, even despite their rarity and high cost. He looked at his father, who began to come to his senses. The guy asked him how he was. At this time, Usak wanted to know how he managed to cure him. The owner came to his senses and was even able to get to his feet. He wanted to thank him for saving his life. The guy handed him a gift as a token of gratitude. Hao said that he would return in a month, by which time they should prepare all the necessary ingredients for him. The mustachioed man was puzzled as to where he could get the necessary ingredients. Everyone was amazed by his healing skills. If there really was such a student at the academy, then he was ready to bring him to them himself. And if Abbot Hua allows him to join his doctor's guild, then he will owe him a favor. The man's mouth opened in surprise. He was not prepared for the fact that he would owe a favor. By the way, if everything works out, he will owe 3 services. The old man wondered what if there was a student at the academy whom they couldn't just give up. His interlocutor suggested that no one in their right mind would want to lose their status. The abbot replied that a pharmacist with such high abilities should be ahead of his ill-wishers. His opponent thought that he had a well-developed mind. At this time, the girl sat thoughtfully in the clearing. Hao saw his little sister and stroked her head. She was so happy to see him that she immediately rushed to hug him. The guy fell on the grass next to her and said that he couldn't even imagine who could be suitable as her companion. Liner wanted to accompany them with her grandfather. The guy stroked her nose. Then he pointed to a place nearby. He was interested in what was ahead. Hao didn't know what was hidden behind the courtyard. The girl replied that the courtyard was a mysterious place where all the best minds of the Feng Yue Academy were gathered. The weakest follower will be in the top 10 of the outer court. She wanted to know the reason why her brother wanted to become a disciple of the inner courtyard. However, Hao only suggested that she return before it got completely dark. Evening fell upon the residents. Hao wanted to sign up for the inner courtyard candidate selection tests. They were ready to include him in the lists because he was already one of the best. The main character was very happy. Hao wanted to know if they had taken Wan Xin. The mentor replied that she was a special student who needed practice. Feng was doubly happy. The day of the courtyard qualifying trials has arrived. The first round began, and the 5th grade students were called to the test. Newcomers also took part in the tests. The mentor announced the beginning. The enemy rushed towards the main character with a move called the Rock Palm. Hao dodged the blow masterfully. The enemy didn't even understand what had happened. Taking advantage of the moment, the hero hit his opponent. He was thrown far forward. The guy fell on his back. He was in a lot of pain. The rest were clearly not prepared to face such force. Hao's opponent clutched his chest. It seemed like the wounds were internal, not external. The mentor announced that Feng had won. The elder was surprised that such a young boy could show such mastery of power control. I wonder if his young doctor is here. The start of the next round was announced. The enemy turned to Hao and thanked him for not killing him during the test. Hao replied that there was nothing wrong with that. At this time, the battle of other players began. In the end, Xuanmeng won. The man was very pleased with his superiority. Hao noticed that he didn't even leave the arena after the fight. They approached him. Baldy said that he was too weak to come up here and fight him. Someone from behind shouted at Xu Yanmeng that he was acting stupid. However, Hao accepted his challenge. In one movement, he climbed into the arena. The bald man was surprised. Onlookers shouted that they were both acting recklessly. The elder said that they should look at how they would behave in battle. The mentor announced that the battle had to begin. The girl began to worry about her brother. Xuan said that it was his own fault, and there will be no mercy. Hao used the Thousand Lightning Fist. The observers were alarmed. They did not understand what was happening in the arena. The old man was surprised that he withstood such a strong blow. Then he deflected another one. The enemy was surprised. Observers saw that he blocked another blow. It was impressive. Hao immediately activated the next attack. The bald man screamed. Hao used Lightning Strike. Xuan was thrown aside. Although he remained on his feet, the enemy became angry. He could not allow such public humiliation. The guy went up against a top-ranking martial artist and didn't lose to him. Baldy used a crushing fist. Hao focused on energy. One of the observers shouted that he needed some help. The old man realized that he was manipulating air currents. Xuan rushed at the protagonist and shouted that he only wished him death. Feng couldn't afford to lose this battle. Hao used Lightning Strike. The enemy did not expect this. Lightning enveloped him from all sides. The guy was suddenly thrown to the side. Blood gushed from his mouth and he made a grunting sound. Someone offered to help the bald man. It was hard to believe that the new guy won. After all, not everyone was capable of this. An observer approached him with a mentor. In the courtyard of the academy, people were already talking about Hao Feng's victory. The girl replied that she knew that Xuanmeng was a martial arts master, but how Feng was able to defeat such a strong opponent was unknown even to her. She turned to the guys and asked where he was. One of them indicated that it was somewhere in the courtyard. The girl thanked them for the information. She was glad to have found him, and she was very pleased that he was the best of the best. The search for Feng Hao continued. Evening fell upon the academy. The moon shone as never before. A figure carefully jumped from a tree branch. The landing was so graceful that it did not attract any unnecessary attention. It was a guy in a yellow robe. He used force, and he directed her towards the residence. I immediately saw the main character through the window. Feng jumped out of the window, and in a split second he found himself in front of the guy. He asked him if it was really the famous Feng Hao standing in front of him. Hao remembered the day of the selection for the academy. The guy's face was familiar. He remembered that impudent fellow who had been chasing Shinner. The guy immediately began to threaten the main character. Junior Feng wanted to know for sure whether it was him or someone else who was helping a scoundrel like him. The guy activated the power. Hao Feng didn't expect that he would have such attributes. He said that death would await him if he did not leave the academy. The inner courtyard is where the academy's finest minds gather, with most of the inner courtyard's adepts capable of achieving the highest levels of martial arts proficiency. At this time, the girl was looking for her brother Hao. She stopped for a second. Her attention was drawn to the tracks. It was strange that they appeared right before her eyes. She buried her face in someone's chest. Hao smiled and asked who she was looking for. The girl hugged him, and he only apologized for being late. He took her hand and said that it was time for them to go to the courtyard. It turned out that there was an internal path leading to the courtyard. Suddenly he felt someone's presence. He felt the energy of dozens of breaths, and from beings of the highest rank. The girl said that he needed to show his badge, then everything would be okay. Hao looked at his token and understood what they were talking about. Most likely he was simply mistaken for a stranger. He took a few steps. Then he exhaled. It was not at all easy to feel this way. An inner courtyard appeared before him. Little Lao appeared next to the guy. She said that Yunying was waiting for him. She was at the first level of fighting spirit, but soon the middle one was waiting for her. Lao said there can be no coincidences. Her cultivation of fighting spirit was only at the initial stage, but her physical strength was already at an advanced stage. It was completely unclear how she managed it. At his current level, he won't have many chances. Hao replied that his fighting ability was limited, and he needed to do something to increase his strength. Lao said there are other ways to increase fighting strength. The guy decided that the issue might be quality. Hao Feng decided that he would increase his level by any means necessary. At this time at the academy, at the counter where first-year students were registered, the protagonist introduced himself as an adept of the inner courtyard. He was met by a bald man. At this time, a long queue formed at the courtyard cultivation tower. It was completely unknown what secrets were hidden inside. Some of the guys who just came in immediately flew back out like a bullet. Feng didn't have time to understand what had happened. Little Lao said that they used the energy of I Ching to train adepts. Using the I Ching to train the body was something unthinkable. Hao said that not everyone uses the lightning attribute. Lao immediately calmed him down and said that everything was fine. It seemed that nothing was impossible for this man. Baldy shouted at Hao that he should get out of the way and not interfere with him. Feng apologized. His foot took a few steps. He had quite a powerful energy. The guy moved forward. Something nearby caught his attention. Suddenly he stopped. Electrical discharges began to appear from below. He was just struck by lightning. The bald man shouted that if this was too much for him, then he needed to get out of there. Hao shouted that there was no need to worry about him. He was pleased to see such an attribute. He finally succeeded in using Yanqing. It was one of the most unbridled energies. He was engulfed in lightning energy again. Even his eyes glowed from it. He was literally electrocuted. The bald man stood not far from him and thought sarcastically about how much strength he had left. After some time, he found himself in a hall where there were many rooms. He was curious about what was hidden behind these doors. Hao stopped his gaze on one of them. A man emerged from there, who apparently suffered the same fate as the main character. The poor guy got burned, and pretty badly. Inside the tower, everything was done too well. Feng thought he was a great conductor of electricity. Most likely, this is how it was. The energy began to rise from the bottom up again. And again, this incredible power surrounded him. It seemed that not everyone could endure this, but for the main character, it was not difficult to endure, especially considering that the bald man had been watching him the whole time. The hero left the cultivation room, and he locked the door with a bolt. About 2 hours passed like this. The bald man didn't understand why this guy hadn't come out yet. Had something really happened to him? Hao, at this time, indulged in meditation. He continued to improve himself. However, the pain did not go away and interfered with concentration. He managed to use the energy of lightning correctly. Lao reminded the hero that this was an excellent training method. Hao was surprised to see the master here. However, the crystal has not yet formed. The master reminded that a rare crystal cannot form just like that, even though it may have the lightning attribute. She wondered if the reason was perhaps that such a rarity could not, in principle, form in this place. Hao didn't understand why, and he didn't understand at all why he started to worry so much. Lao said that when he became a master of the dominance level, many unknown secrets would be revealed to him, and he would gain unexpected benefits from it. The guy didn't understand how this was possible. He was much more interested in cultivating. He endured for 9 hours straight. He didn't have any strength left for more. The sun had set, and the courtyard was preparing to welcome the night. Baldy met Hao and asked him how he was able to stay there for so long. It turned out that he was able to stay inside for 11 hours. Hao was worried that Shinner might be waiting for him. He started running as fast as he could. The bald man shouted at him to come back to him during the day. The moon illuminated the sky. Hao put his arm around the girl's shoulders and apologized for making her wait so long. The girl was glad that she waited for him, despite everything. As soon as Hao approached her with his lips, someone's voice was heard from behind. The guy didn't expect to see Hu here. Yun-Hu was clearly not happy that there was someone unknown near the girl. The girl just opened her mouth in surprise. Hu wanted to know who was in front of him. She introduced them to each other. Hao realized that she had talked about this man before. He thanked him for taking care of Shinner. Feng said that he will always protect his woman. The guy clenched his teeth in anger. He felt like his heart had literally shattered into pieces. It looks like he was rejected. It was unacceptable to him that a mid-level master would take her away from him. The girl didn't want to become the cause of a fight. The guy shouted that she was so dear to him that he would not allow anyone to take her away from him. However, Hu's heart was broken. The main character was interested in how strong the guy in front of him was. Hu shouted towards the guy that he was ready to start the battle at any moment. He looked to be under 20, was of intermediate martial arts level, and most likely also had the earth attribute. A weak man has no place next to such a girl. Suddenly, Sinner appeared and said that they should stop competing. The guy took her hand. He began to calm her down and said that everything would be fine, and he convinced her that he could deal with anyone in a minute. The minister's grandson appeared. He was rooting for Hu and ordered him to crush him with one blow. He was curious what Feng could do under these circumstances. Hu jumped up. He headed towards the main character. Hao immediately activated his Thunder Fist. The boys clashed in a fight. After the first blow, both remained on their feet. The others didn't expect the protagonist to be able to withstand the blow. The guy used a Bear Fist. Junior Feng blocked the blow and activated a thunderous attack. He hit him easily. The guy was surprised that this was possible. The protagonist took a few steps forward. Blood was running down his hand. He had no idea where the monster could have come from. The minister's grandson stood nearby and thought about how the guy in front of him had defeated Yun-Hu, who was known for his defensive capabilities. Suddenly a voice was heard. The blonde girl appeared out of nowhere. She wanted to know what happened. She saw Yun-Hu and asked what he was doing here. She wanted to know what was wrong with his hand. The guy replied that he was fine. However, something was wrong here. Feng suspected something was wrong. The blonde girl wanted an explanation. The protagonist understood that sharing skills between ordinary students was against the academy's rules. The girl instantly became furious that he was trying to challenge her. However, someone stood up to defend the main character. It was her student. Hao grabbed Shinner's hand. Teacher Yunying was too impatient. He wanted to remind him that the real battle would take place in a month and a half. The others watched what was happening, wanting to challenge the master of the martial spirit. At first, she did not take seriously the challenge he threw at her several years ago. In another city, she understood that now she had no other choice. The boy arranged to meet her at this very place, but in a month and a half, night fell on the academy. After the protagonist visited the cultivation tower, he was completely confident that within a month and a half, he could become a great martial artist. The bald man said that he was not expecting him at such a late hour. The protagonist felt awkward. He reminded him that he was not yet aware of all the affairs. Besides, he was new here. The man turned out to be the third elder named Lao Jianmu. The guy was excited that such an influential person was in front of him. A thought appeared in his mind that this Lao Jianmu should be a third-level ancestral master, but still, he was only third. This meant that above him stood the first and second elders, and probably also a fourth and fifth. The elder said that he had seen many, but he had never met such a young talent before. He reminded the boy that when you go to cultivate, you should never go near the abyss. Hao shouted that there was a thunder dungeon there, and many ancestor-level elders had once fallen into the abyss. The man remembered the family's ancestor when he first came to this place. In this place, he discovered a thunder prison inside a meteorite crater. Soon, the cultivation tower was built, and the Hua family finally established itself in the new location. However, this ancestor could not know what was inside the thunder dungeon. He went to explore her and was never seen again. Of all those who went there, no one survived. Hao thanked the elder for the advice. At this rate, he could reach the highest level of master in just a couple of days. If he becomes a great martial artist, and the power of the thunderclap will be limitless. At this time, at the prince's residence, the two discussed how Feng had managed to get rid of the poison in his body. Moreover, the man was willing to say that after Feng Hao entered the Feng Yue Academy, there had been complete chaos in the outer and inner courtyard. The old man pretended not to remember what 3-year agreement was being discussed. His interlocutor's eyes widened, and he immediately realized that he was in trouble. These were just quarrels. He shouldn't have worried so much. A representative of the imperial family shouted that the boy was in mortal danger. Yun Sheng was poisoned, just like him. But for the sake of peace in the country, he told almost no one about it. Only Feng Hao was able to get rid of the poison. But if he and Yunyin fought, there was no saving him. They couldn't lose Yun Sheng. He was ready to find Yunyin right now. The old man said that it was worth waiting a little and seeing how everything would turn out. He said that this guy has such a character, that if something goes wrong, his hatred will only increase. Half a month passed. Feng continued training all this time. Finally, he managed to move to the next level. He knew that all his efforts were worth what he was striving for. He needed to continue cultivating. The pill was almost gone. He needed to take some medicinal herbs urgently, otherwise it would be dangerous for him to stay in this place. The hero headed to the auction house. A month and 1 day passed. They were already waiting for him. A guy burst into the room and said that he was late. Finally, the son of the auction house owner saw the main character. They waited for him after all. Feng asked him to take him to the master quickly. He apologized for not greeting the gentleman. All the medicinal herbs he asked for were inside the ring. Hao picked up the item and said he was ready to look. A bright glow appeared around the ring and began to spread quickly around it. Feng replied that, as expected, this is what was needed. He decided that he would take his medication first, and only then will he treat the patient. A light began to emerge within her. This light spread around. After some time, he was ready to use his healing abilities. Half an hour passed. The son of the father of the auction house wanted to know how he was feeling. The man replied that he felt much better now. He was ready to thank him generously. Feng expected nothing in return. The guy pointed out that they could add more. He obediently took the object in his hands. One thing immediately surprised him. Inside the ring, he immediately saw tens of thousands of rare spiritual medicines. And of course, battle crystals were waiting for him. He didn't know what to say. Then he thanked him for the gift. Father and son saw him off and reminded him that he would always be welcome at the auction house, and that with the help of these spiritual medicines and battle crystals, it would be easier for him to become a great martial arts master. After some time, he returned to the residence. Hao was surprised by the sudden meeting. The head of Goi replied that he had been waiting for him for a long time. The man introduced himself. But then I immediately felt awkward. Besides, I have already agreed with Hua Yunlong to stay in the Doctor's Guild. Lao Quan had too high an opinion of the main character. The man bowed and said that they recognized his abilities as a doctor. Feng replied that he could not create a real pill in his body. The head was afraid that the discussion was about the class of land. Feng Hao appreciated Lao Kuang's good intentions, although it was clear that without cultivation it was impossible to achieve such a level. Finally, that very day came. Teacher Yunying was supposed to appear. The girl was ready for battle. The observers had already crowded around. The most influential elders wanted to watch the long-awaited fight. The battle seemed to have attracted the attention of senior leadership. One of them wanted to know more about the guy the fight would be over. However, they did not want to rush things. If Yunying wins, he will owe him 20 battle crystals. The man was shocked when he heard that he was betting on the main character. It would be better not to waste time on words and prepare battle crystals. An hour passed, but there was no one there, and many began to think that he was simply a coward. Of course, an ordinary guy can never compare to a real master. The elder asked not to worry, as he would definitely not come. Could it be that he still hasn't finished his cultivation in that tower? At this time, in one of the rooms of the tower, the room was filled with lightning. He needed very little time. He had no choice. The final blow was supposed to decide everything. Hao was enveloped in energy. The force was so great that it began to spread in different directions. Finally, the level of a great martial artist was reached. Little Hao said that she was rejoicing too soon. If he didn't hurry, all his efforts would be in vain. Feng was surprised. Suddenly he remembered that he had a battle ahead of him. Everyone gathered together. The mentors looked down on everything. It was necessary to prepare 20 battle crystals. The mentor was unhappy that the main character was still missing. Finally, he became a great master. Just a month and a half ago, he was at the intermediate level of martial artist. Someone from the crowd recognized him as the great master. They didn't understand why this happened. The mentor said that soon they would part with their crystals. However, even before the great master, he will still be defeated. Shinner said that she was very worried about the main character. The guy replied that nothing would happen to him. The guy asked her to wait here, but he did not go unnoticed. The mentors continued to observe the course of events. It was necessary to greet the abbot. One of them ordered him to stop. Hao replied that he wouldn't miss such a meeting and was glad that Yunying had come. She thought that he had changed a lot in 3 years, and they didn't expect that he would become such a great master. Feng recalled that 3 years ago he said that he would destroy her with his own hands. The girl could not forgive such insolence. The observers began to wait for the performance. One of them understood that the battle would only happen because of Yunying's stubbornness. The elder ordered that everything be done to ensure that nothing happened to them. They were ready to start the battle. The girl attacked first. She used an ice strike and ice shards were sent forward. Feng was able to block the attack. Then he dodged again. The girl was very surprised. The boy noted that he would have to study her fighting tactics most likely. She was testing him too. Most likely she checked it too. Hao used Ultra Thunder Fist. Yin also easily dealt with his attack. Next, she used the Ice Shifting Palm. Feng easily destroyed each of the ice fists. Hao activated the lightning. Then he shouted at her to die. The mentor activated the Ice Palm again. The boy successfully parried the blow. Lightning appeared all around. She chuckled. But she also blocked the shot masterfully. He couldn't even touch her. Hao immediately flew away a decent distance. Shinner became worried about the protagonist. The guy took a few steps forward. After that, it was curious how it was possible to survive. But no one understood exactly how. The mentor thought that such skill could only be passed down through inheritance. The rest were very surprised and impressed. They were curious what else he could do that would surprise them. Now the guy could only use a couple of thunder techniques, but they required too much strength. Thanks to the pill, his body immediately recovered from the damage. If he learned low-level heavenly blow softening techniques, it would be easier for him. The battle would go in his favor. He said he was willing to try again. The guy showed all his strength. It was impossible not to notice such power. Moreover, this technique was rarely repeated by anyone. And he did it again. Hao immediately rushed into battle. Of course, he was much stronger than expected. Yunyin shifting Ice Palm. Several fragments flew in his direction. The protagonist successfully repelled the attack, and he used a thunder strike. Yun couldn't believe her eyes. The guy flew high to the side. The girl looked high into the sky. She needed to somehow repel the attack. Junior Feng used Thunderclap again. His rival responded by freezing him. The air instantly turned icy. The others began to rejoice at this. They were surprised that on such a hot day, they felt real winter. The girl rose into the air. The boys were delighted with her article. The main character did not hesitate and decided to attack her from the air. The girl immediately summoned the power of the seal. Ice shards flew into the air again. It seemed that this was her limit. The guy used the power of thunder again. Ice appeared out of nowhere. Lightning began to pierce him with great force. The rest barely managed to dodge. The girl took a few steps. Hao concentrated and directed all his power towards his opponent. The main character had no right to make a mistake. All he had to do was break through the wall of ice. His energy grew more powerful with every movement. The elder wondered whether he would be able to make sure that everything would be fine in the future. Shinner screamed. She was so scared, but she couldn't help the guy in any way. The guy didn't give up. He tried to break through the ice with all his might. Everything he did for the honor of the family. He couldn't fail in this battle. However, the guy's strength was not strong enough. The observer said that he would be immediately destroyed by the ice seal, and it was necessary to somehow save the guy. The old man realized that Yun Yin also needed help. The rest began to worry about the crystals. The girl tried to convince them that she could handle it herself. The old man realized that this child had much more energy than he thought. However, the main character had a different attitude. Energy appeared inside him again. He felt a heat he had never felt before. Now he became stronger, which made him feel much better. The guy used force again. Yun froze in confusion, and almost missed the blow. Another piece of ice flew towards him. The guy saw the fragments crumbling before his eyes. The guys who stood nearby could not understand where he got such strength from. The mentor could not help but admire such a miracle. He simply couldn't materialize such high-level energy. One of the fragments simply fell onto the frozen ground. The guy couldn't help but react to this. He had to overcome the ice wall. He took a few steps. The girl was perplexed. Hao shouted at her to keep fighting. She didn't even have time to react. Her hand rose smoothly upward. Lightning began to appear all around. The girl realized that she would not be able to control such energy. The energy was getting out of control. Hao looked up at her. A powerful glow appeared all around, sweeping away everything around. The snow fog began to clear. In front of the main character there were only blocks of ice. The guys standing nearby didn't know how to react to this. The heat in the protagonist's body appeared again at a critical moment. With his blow, he seriously damaged the meridians in her arm, and if it weren't for the ice energy that forced him to retreat, she would have lost her arm. It seemed like they were both going to lose, so there was no need to worry so much. She was surprised that he also had a pharmacopoeia. She was even envious that some boy had a pharmacopoeia and could heal faster than her. Only a heavenly-level doctor could heal so quickly. Hao thought that she was also healing her wounds. He was still able to fight. Yun didn't know how to react to them. The protagonist continued to attack. He swung at her again. The girl had a few seconds to react, but she dodged the attack again. The girl screamed and fell on the ice. Junior Feng realized that she was completely exhausted, so she lost. The others could not believe that one of the most outstanding mentors could suffer a defeat. She was disheveled and lying on the ground, completely unable to understand how she could have lost to some boy. And then she began to lose consciousness. Suddenly a figure descended from the sky. The man landed softly. The elder ordered them to stop. However, Yun Yin quietly said that she was not ready to give up, at least while she's alive. Hao didn't expect anything else from her. He remembered the oath he had taken several years ago. Finally, he had a chance to kill her with his own hands. Shinner screamed when she saw that the teacher had lost. She approached the main character and asked him to stop fighting. The elder asked them to end the squabble and reminded the girl that she had lost. The girl became indignant. The main character thanked the mentor for the congratulations. Now that the matter was settled, he hoped that they would forget their feud. The old man invited them to follow him. He smiled slyly, and he said that he knew for sure that he would impress everyone. At this time, Hao bowed and thanked the third elder. The elder gave him battle crystals. He smiled and said that he didn't get them for nothing. He won them in a bet. Since Hao Feng is the winner, he deserves these crystals. The boy thanked the elder for such a generous gift. Suddenly he felt a blow. He couldn't stand on his feet. Shinner asked if he was okay. The boy replied that he was completely fine. He could just breathe a little easier and relax now. The boy took revenge for the humiliation. Soon he had a meeting with the abbot. The elder explained to Yun Yin that her grandfather was very seriously ill, but only one person could cure him, and she would need to meet with him. The man named the main character. The teacher was amazed. The elder replied that he had experience in healing and could be trusted. The girl did not understand how this was possible. She was very angry then, and her stupidity was the cause of all this. I would never have thought that it was she who behaved rudely. The man said that it was worth trying to persuade him. At this time, in the Yun estate, this man is an adept of the academy's inner courtyard. He was accepted only recently. The bearded old man was surprised that he had never heard anything about him before. The girl knelt down in front of him, out of despair. He took her hand and said that he was ready to do anything. The girl asked that the results of the fight be announced to the entire country. She needed everyone in the Salon Kingdom to know that the protagonist was able to defeat her. His eyes widened. Yun bowed. The man shouted that this was complete nonsense, and he doesn't agree to do such nonsense, At this time, a representative of the imperial family appeared and said that it would be better for them if they did what she asked. The old man was angry. He did not understand what was happening in this place. It only concerned his family. He asked them not to interfere in matters that were none of their business. Grandfather Hua noted that there was nothing in this country that his family could not handle. He walked up to Yun, offered her hand and asked him to stand up. An old man immediately approached him and said that no one dared to behave like that. Grandfather was perplexed. Grandfather Hua instantly blocked the blow. The girl asked them to stop the fight, but no one listened to her, so she had to use force. Suddenly, she started coughing up blood. The man shouted her name. She was wounded. No one could help her. The girl asked her grandfather to fulfill her request. Grandfather asked Yun Hu to bring medicine. At this time, at the residence, the old man wanted to know who saved him. When he heard the main character's name, he asked him to do as he said. Soon, in Yulan City, in the Feng family mansion, the rest were ready to greet the head of the family. Elder Feng wanted to know what happened to them. He won the battle, thus fulfilling the promise he made 3 years ago, and then saved the family from shame. Senior Feng couldn't believe that this was true. It turned out that this became known not only in this city, but throughout the entire kingdom. They could not refuse the title of head, and besides, it concerned their families. Since they considered him worthy, he was ready to accept the title of head of the family. A guy rushed towards him, shouting that he had urgent news. Senior Feng asked what happened. The boy replied that the head general had just arrived in the city and requested an audience. He was already waiting for them at the gate. He had an order to read the royal decree to the head of the Feng family. By the will of heaven and the dictates of fate, the king summoned Feng Hao. The head of the Feng family was also prepared to grant the hereditary title of Marquis. Feng Chen bowed and thanked His Majesty for his favor. Their family had a noble title. It was an important day for their family. They were ready to go to the royal capital. The leader said that he was ready to offer his congratulations and explained that they had come here to escort them to the capital. Elder Feng understood that this was the merit of another person who had to overcome many difficulties on his path. Soon, in the residence of shadows, the Black Guard asked permission to speak with the elder. The cult leader allowed him to speak. The messenger replied that a message had arrived from the royal capital. The cultist replied that this old man also refused to obey. It didn't matter anymore. Very soon the kingdom of Zealand would cease to exist. However, it didn't matter anymore. The messenger replied that there was something else. From a reliable source they learned that the prince had returned to the capital. He was poisoned about 10 years ago. He already had 1 foot in the grave, but he wanted to return. The guy replied that he had no signs of poisoning, and that it looked like he had recovered and was completely healthy. The leader couldn't believe his ears. This poison was made by the Holy Virgin herself. No one could be cured from it. He shouted that a doctor of such a high level simply did not exist. However, now he has information about it. The man grabbed the messenger by the throat and said that he had let him down once again. Then he cursed at him that he would be of no use. He did not respond to requests for mercy. At this time, at the residence, the protagonist continued his cultivation. He trained without interruption. They called out to him and told him that his girlfriend was looking for him. All he wanted was to reach the highest level of martial spirits. Little Master Lao appeared in front of the boy and told him not to even think about becoming stronger than the martial spirits. The lightning attribute can increase the speed of body training, but it cannot be relied upon for what it is intended to do. External force could only affect his bones and entrails. The Black Tower is limited only by the level of martial spirits, which is why the academy is full of masters. The level of the highest martial ancestors was an important stage on the path to learning martial arts. An ancestral level master receives energy from 5 internal organs. In each of the 5 organs, an additional energy funnel can appear. Thus, at the martial ancestral level, he will have 5 sub-levels. Grandfather Hua was at the 2nd level. He had already refined his heart and liver. Before, Hao had never heard of funnels. He didn't know about the world of battle spirits. Drawing internal energy from funnels is an amazing skill. Hao noticed Shinner. She grabbed his hand and pulled him along with her. There was no time to hurry. It turned out that Uncle Feng had arrived in the capital. He was surprised because he didn't expect to be able to see it. Soon, in the temple of the Shadow Demon sect, a messenger appeared before the girl and reported that the poison, personally prepared by the Holy Virgin, had been neutralized. He knew that it was the youngest pharmacist who did it. The girl said that it was necessary to immediately notify the elders and call a council. And that's what they did. A figure appeared in front of them. She was a saint. She broke the news that their unrivaled poison could now be neutralized. The sect members were ready to make every effort to destroy the root of evil. The saint replied that everything needed to be done as quickly as possible. The sectarians did not contradict her. She also said that he was able to cure the owner of the auction house from a rare disease. They had never met such a strong master before. The followers could not believe that this was possible. The saint sat on the throne and said that she could simply kill the boy. Although killing him would be too easy, she wanted to see him in person. All it took was a little patience. Soon, at the Feng family residence in the capital, Elder Feng gathered with the others in the square. The main character, in the company of a girl, told his father that he had returned. He was happy that his son was okay. The hero introduced the girl to him. Grandfather Hua was glad to see the boy. It was necessary to greet the prince. The others were curious about the reason Hao had returned. His sister was already waiting for him. She was horrified. He had a new girlfriend with him. He held her hand tightly and had no plans to let go. The girl looked intently at the brunette. They immediately hated each other. Grandfather Hua laughed, and Zinner just took the guy by the arm and led him away. The girl remained standing, shrouded in misunderstanding and anger. Suddenly, she threw herself on the main character's chest. Elder Feng couldn't believe what was happening to his son. The three of them had to go to the backyard. Elder Feng said that cheating on girls is not good. Soon, Yun Long, the director of the Feng Academy, arrived. They didn't understand what exactly brought them here. It turned out that the problem was a little genius. Two distinguished men appeared on the threshold. Those present began to whisper suspiciously. The owner of the auction house appeared on the doorstep with his son. The head of the Doctors Guild also arrived at the scene. The others were curious about what kind of Feng family this was. The marshal and the mentor arrived next. Feng was glad that she came. The girl was still upset after losing the battle with Hao Feng. Some of those present didn't even know what the marshal actually looked like. This time, he appeared here to ask for forgiveness. Never before had such high-ranking people been distinguished by such noble deeds. He said that responsibility for his successors lies with him, and that he does not tolerate bad treatment, either towards himself or towards people. After these words, he fell to his knees in front of Father Hao. Elder Feng began to calm him down and say that anyone can make a mistake. This time, everyone who was on the scene could witness what a minor conflict could do. Grandfather Hua demanded an apology. It was impossible to believe that after only 3 years he had to publicly apologize to him. The girl bowed and began to ask for forgiveness. The representative of the Hua imperial family smiled and said that they would forget about this conflict. However, the main character did not plan to give up. The others started shouting that he had gone crazy and that the marshal would not forgive this. But the main character behaved too brazenly. He recalled that the mentor had insulted the head of the family and disgraced his family throughout the city. It was impossible to forgive something like that. She understood that. Hao was no longer the naive boy he used to be. The girl began to shout that she would do everything to earn forgiveness. The protagonist saw that the girl immediately ran up to him. It turned out that it was Shinner. The girl pressed herself against the protagonist's shoulder and asked him to forgive teacher Yun Yin. The teacher did not take her eyes off him. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. It seemed that the heart really cannot be commanded. Senior Feng was genuinely glad that Yun Ying admitted her guilt. He wanted to thank his mentor. If it weren't for her, the Feng family would still be in Yulan City. The main character said that he didn't care, and he wouldn't just leave. Old Man Hua replied that they were all family. Then he turned to his interlocutor and said that he was very dangerous. Several days passed. The man said that he would remember their kindness and repay them in kind. The old man found it strange that the poison was partly made from spiritual medicine. Hao replied that this remedy was extremely dangerous. At this time, in the cultivation tower, the guy closed his eyes. He continued training, his insides ablaze with energy. He felt that his life force was running out. Suddenly little Lao appeared and said that they urgently needed to use the battle crystal. Hao remembered the battle crystal. 2 spheres appeared in his hands. He felt better. We need to clarify what happened. Besides, energy needs to be replenished. Lao reminded him that he was already at the 6th stage of a great martial arts master. Hao replied that there was one thing she shouldn't have told him. The protagonist was given instructions to eat on time. The guy didn't expect that such a creature would also have to be fed. If only at the level of a great master, Hao thought that he would have to obtain as many battle crystals as he needed. He understood that there would not be as many crystals in the entire country as he needed. It remains to be seen where exactly he should move, and how dangerous will it be there. Hao was worried that it might be dangerous there. The master could not tell him everything at once. She immediately decided to teach him a lesson. Ruins are what remains of ancient buildings. The guy was surprised. He understood that it might not be as easy for him as he expected. But secret techniques were at stake. It was there that countless ancient tombs awaited him. Hao thought that he could use some treasure. Lao said she wasn't asking him to rob anyone. The protagonist was unhappy that he would have to make do with the leftovers. He was interested in where the place was that contained all these antiquities. At this time, in the prince's mansion, one of the old men asked him why he couldn't stay at home. It turned out that the main character needed information about abandoned ruins. Old Man Hua replied that the place was not that safe, so going there alone was not the best idea. Hao smiled and said that he wanted to try his luck in the open tombs. Hua replied that even with his talents, it would be better for him not to appear there. When there is a battle, no one cares who you are. Grandfather wanted to make sure he had to go there. However, he was willing to help the guy and give him something to take with him. He handed him a map of the ruins. The boy opened the scroll. Grandfather Hua said that he should avoid the red zones. The city was marked with a green dot. It was the safest place. The boy thanked the old man and was ready to head to Juan. The old man replied that a doctor's robe could help him. Soon at the academy, the girls grabbed the guy under the elbows. They weren't ready to let him go alone. Hao laughed. He couldn't take two of them with him on the trip. One of them said that she does not allow him to have affairs behind her back. Otherwise, she simply won't forgive him. Soon in the office of the director of the academy. It was important to understand how long this might take. The protagonist replied that he wasn't really sure, maybe a year or two. The director replied that he would like to see the boy at the national competition. Residents of all the Jin dynasty's possessions up to the age of 30 could take part in them. Everyone will compete in strength, and the winner will be generously rewarded with 1,000 crystals. Hao was amazed. Such a quantity of crystals could help him a lot. In addition, the top 3 participants could be awarded the honor of entering the Royal Mountain. The Royal Mountain is a place where the strongest of the strongest gather only the most worthy of all could enter. And for any family, this is a great honor. The guy wanted to know what his country's results were in the competition. The director replied that national competitions are held every decade, and each kingdom can send 10 participants there. Last time, the kingdom couldn't even get into the first 1,000. Hao wanted to know how strong the final winner was. The director replied that it was the second Inner Limit's battle ancestor, and that he had refined the crystals, and all of the top 3 participants were in the second Inner Limit. The old man replied that he knew that the boy would ask him about this. The director handed him the scrolls, and said that this data was not final. Hao fell to his knees and began to thank the director. The man answered him that in 2 years he would be expected in the capital. He would take one of 10 places for him. The guy replied that the map showed 1,000 Lai Fire Mountain. The probability that there would be crystals there was quite high. But first he needed to go to the demonic ridge. Lao, who appeared behind him, objected that he simply wouldn't have enough strength. 2 days later, he arrived at the demonic ridge. With a thunderous blow, he finished off the magical beast, and for this, he was lucky enough to receive 2 luxurious rare treasures. His attention was caught by some sound nearby. Hao immediately rushed towards where the sound was coming from. It all happened too quickly. A fire tiger appeared from behind the bushes. The bald man fell to his knee, and he said that they needed to leave, at which time the tiger attempted to attack. The bald man with the scar on his face screamed. He wanted this fucking cat to attack if it had the strength. Suddenly blood spurted in all directions. The saint simply stood and watched what was happening. She was afraid that she would die here. The tiger was preparing to attack the girl. All she could do was scream, hoping that someone would help her. Lightning pierced space. The cat just wouldn't calm down. Lightning struck and wounded the animal. The animal fell to the ground. The girl saw Hao and was very surprised that it was a doctor in front of her. He extended his hand and asked if everything was okay with them. Night fell on the demonic wasteland. Hao decided to cook something to eat. The girl thanked him. She had a special herb in her purse. Hao didn't know what to do next. He apologized to the girl for his curiosity, said that she needed to eat and rest, and that he would take her home in the morning. The saint thanked the protagonist. The demon sex maiden had gone to great lengths to get closer. She really didn't want to be let down, and now she had a person with her who could save her from any poison. They needed to continue on their way. They moved on. The saint introduced herself and said that her name was Qing. The girl said that she was from a small village, so she came to the demonic ridge to collect medicine for her father. They don't know what their father is sick with, but most likely it's a very strong poison. It is possible that they were talking about a poison that he had already encountered. Hao said he had heard of such a thing, but had never encountered such a power before. The girl asked Feng to save her father from poison. Her family is willing to pay him 20 crystals for the service. The guy was ready not only to save a human life, but also to earn some money. Of course, first and foremost, he was interested in crystals. He turned to Lao and said that this girl should not let her guard down. Full of determination, the hero headed to the kingdom. Several days passed. It was scorching hot, which was common in the Fire Mountain, as it was located on the border with the Yun Kingdom. He needed the master to wake up. Little Lao was unhappy with the sudden awakening. She realized that there was a fire attribute in this place. Hao turned to Miss Qing and said that they would have to stay in this place for a while. Then the guy assured her that he would definitely help her. The girl didn't react at all. He took a couple of steps. Feng's mouth dropped open in surprise. Lava emerged from the mouth of the fiery mountain, and people crowded around, awaiting the inevitable. The guy looked ahead with interest. The saint shared that inside this mountain, there is a crystal that is hundreds of years old. How thought that the volcano could have gone dormant after such a long time. The girl replied that these people came specifically for the crystal. However, some people simply came to gaze at the fiery mountain. Some fire attribute holders chose this place for cultivation, but no one dared to enter the mountain. The girl said that a large group of warrior ancestors entered the mountain in search of the crystal, but only a few managed to get out with serious injuries. Over the centuries, countless martial artists have attempted to enter the mountain. They saw the entrance to the mountain. The main character asked the girl to wait for him there. However, entering the mountain is mortally dangerous. He threw the robe over himself, realizing that they had no other choice. The saint thought that the guy might not cope. No matter how much strength he possessed, the risk was too high. She decided to wait and see what would happen next. Suddenly, something flew before her eyes. It was a male figure, dressed in a robe, and the girl ordered him to do everything to ensure that the pharmacist did not die. She was curious whether anyone would be able to get the crystal. Her main task was to do everything to ensure that no one else would get such a treasure. Now the saint was doubly interested. At this time, Hao, accompanied by little Lao, approached the volcano. They discussed what they would do, considering that such a feat required a serious level of skill. Lao suggested that he use more battle crystals, but the boy objected that he only had 7 left. However, there was another way. There was only one condition: you would have to endure the pain. Lao apologized and said that she would protect him from the flames, but he would have to endure the pain. The main character replied that he was not ready to die yet. Lao smirked. She said they needed to move on, and that a cooling medicine would help him along the way. Feng felt that the crystal was somewhere nearby. There was very little time. The others stared at him as if he were crazy. Many brave men had tried to do something similar before, although many of them understood that it was impossible to survive after this. The temperature was so high that the robe began to burn, and flames appeared on his shoulders. Even though he had protection, he still felt the power of the fire. It was necessary to come up with something quickly. Luckily, he had a ring with medicine. He took out the herbs and ate them. He felt instantly better. It took the guy a few seconds to assess the situation around him and decide where to move next. However, the heat only intensified. The guy opened his eyes. He tried to move among the fire and smoke. Hao took a few steps forward. It was not easy for him, but he continued to overcome the elements. With every movement, it became more and more difficult for him to move. He decided that this would not continue. He will need to spend battle crystals. He was able to create a sphere around himself that could protect him. He needed to build a defense that would prevent him from burning alive. The ice attribute will protect the body. The temperature will drop to a tolerable level. There was no time to think. He rushed forward. Several hours passed in this rhythm. A protective dome protected him from fire. He stopped. It seemed as if the demon of drought itself had awakened from its slumber. He turned to Lao and asked what to do now. He simply didn't have enough strength. The master replied that all elves and monsters were capable of creating spiritual weapons of at least an intermediate level. The guy used a spiritual weapon that was much stronger than usual. Lao ordered him to go forward, as the drought demon was simply guarding the crystal. The flames flared up with renewed vigor. The fire thickened in front of him. It was a different color. It seemed as if something was about to burst out of the fire. Hao's eyes widened in fear. It was a drought demon, a ferocious fire monster. It was this creature that killed everyone who tried to get the crystal. The creature was very angry. His appearance caused fiery tornadoes to form around him. People began to run in fear, hoping to escape the wrath of the drought demon. It was unclear who could have angered the mountain lord so much. The saint observed everything from above. It was unclear whether he would be able to cope with the drought demon. She also had no other choice. The guy was trying to escape the fire, which was literally rushing and biting him like a living creature. The flames were so powerful that Hao couldn't bear it and fell. Even his shield couldn't withstand such an onslaught of temperatures, and the guy began to fall rapidly downwards. The demon saw him and immediately directed his attack in his direction. His attack looked like a purple fire dragon. Hao materialized the sphere. However, the fire began to spread around with even greater force. The guy managed to survive the fall and land on his feet. However, his body was not strong enough to withstand this. He fell to the ground, and it seemed like he was about to lose consciousness. At that moment, the ring began to protect him. The internal energy literally burst out of him, and she lifted him into the air. The demonic entity had never seen such power before, and she growled from anger and fear of the unknown energy. It took him a second to raise walls of fire from the ground and direct them at the enemy. The monster roared. Behind him, his little Lao appeared, easily subduing the demon, and she easily lifted him into the air by his impressive robe, like a kitten by the scruff of the neck. The observers heard the roar of the drought demon. They were surprised that someone so strong that he could defeat the drought demon had appeared. Hao was ready for another attack. It seemed as if his energy would engulf the demon. He was ready to destroy him at that very second. The demon howled. He was literally torn apart. The protagonist's energy literally dematerialized him. This was the core. Such a thing would definitely be useful in his arsenal. He had to deal with them himself. Along with Lao's energy, the guy lost his balance and fell to the ground from a height like a sack of potatoes. It was hard to believe that anyone had the power to destroy the drought demon. People were eager to know who killed him. Many rushed to the mountain to see him. They were terribly curious to know who was capable of such a thing. One of them pointed his finger at the guy. It seemed that what stood before them was merely a great martial artist. Among the fire, the guy saw several figures. He felt their aggression. He did not want to use the battle crystals that he had obtained with such difficulty. There were about 8 people in front of him. It won't be easy for him to cope with such a gang alone. He decided to attack first. The bald man with a mustache did not expect such a greeting. Lightning struck him, and blood gushed in all directions. He screamed in pain. The boys had never seen such a move before. They knew they couldn't handle him. However, even after 3 hours, they did not leave him alone, although they definitely recognized him as a great master. This guy clearly had a fair amount of crystals, but he only had 1 life. They followed him, hoping to catch up with him. Suddenly, high on the mountain, they saw a figure. Dark matter headed towards them. She reached one of them. The guy didn't even have time to dodge. The poison began to envelop him. The boys immediately realized that a master of poisons stood before them. How deadly the poison he released remained a mystery. Suddenly, the master moved in the air. They froze, not knowing what to expect next. At this time, the main character returned to the cave. The saint was waiting for him with the crystal. She didn't understand how he managed to do it, but he got the crystal. What impressed her most was that he was able to destroy the drought demon. She wondered if he could make it better. He nodded and said that he would do it as soon as he saved her father. Suddenly, he used force and closed the entrance to the cave with a huge boulder. And he asked the girl not to come too close to him. She even became interested in whether he was a human being and what needs he still had. Whether he felt hunger, for example. At this time, the guy was devouring the meat of the killed animal. He understood that if she achieved a higher rank, the chances of strengthening the crystal would be higher. The boy felt the energy that began to fill him from within. Suddenly, Lao appeared and said that this time everything was not so simple. The pill of immortality is something like an indicator of the purity and innocence of a being. So the highest rank cannot just be obtained by just anyone. Lao explained that at his level, it was a waste of time, and she said that she was ready to help him. Her little hand touched his. The guy was surprised. This time the sensations were too unusual. He needed to get into a special state. Hao sat down in a meditation pose. The saint immediately understood that it was a matter of fighting spirit. She wondered how he could level up 2 levels at once. Apparently it was some kind of secret technology. Hao approached the master and said that he could improve the crystal. A fire crystal appeared in his hands. He was ready to absorb its energy. The saint was ready for a miracle to happen before her eyes. The guy was engulfed in flames. It started raining outside. The guy was engulfed in flames and it seemed like he would never come to. Suddenly he opened his eyes. He managed to improve the crystal. The guy literally started steaming. He suddenly felt hot. The girl approached him and asked if he was okay. The guy couldn't come to his senses. And tear your gaze away from her friendly appearance. His eyes glowed with red fire. He approached the maiden. She became frightened. But she immediately said that she would bury him if he took another step. The guy didn't listen to her. The girl used the power of the cult. The boy's behavior angered her. She didn't expect that after such a blow, he would be able to get up and come to her. The guy grabbed her around the waist. The girl began to resist. Hao ordered her to relax and enjoy herself. Suddenly, he touched her lips. Tears streamed down the girl's cheeks. The guy started to take off her dress. There was nowhere to run. At this time, the thunderstorm intensified so much that the noise could be heard even inside the cave. Morning came and it was time to move on. She didn't expect her poison to work. The girl herself found herself in the role of a missing victim. Besides, she still had a chance to kill the guy last night. Ho woke up. He needed to understand where he was. Hao didn't understand what happened. There was no one in the cave. Lao said he was very lucky. The saint was nowhere to be found. Lao asked if he remembered what happened. It seemed to him that everything that happened was just a dream. This time he was very lucky to stay alive. If he weren't a pharmacist, he would most likely be dead by now. The guy was ready to visit her, and he also promised to help her. He was ready to find her family. Besides, this kingdom is quite rich. Soon he approached the house. He asked the guards to report his visit. The security looked at each other. They immediately recognized who was standing in front of them. The warriors escorted the boy. The guy examined the girl's father. There really was poison in him. The protagonist bowed and said that he would do everything in his power. He immediately began treatment. Several hours passed, and he was able to remove the poison from his system. After he finished, the guy expressed his desire to discuss something. He was wondering where his daughter was. The father replied that as soon as she returned home, she said that Feng would come to help, and then left. She also asked to tell the main character that they would meet again. The guy didn't waste any time, thanked the girl's father and hurried away. Lao said that he shouldn't look for her, and he explained that this girl was a member of a sect. It was precisely the divine power of the pharmacopoeia that saved him. The boy began to think that this could be some kind of cunning plan. It became clear to him that he was being covered by a high-ranking poison master, but he didn't understand at all why they had such an interest in him. It was necessary to become stronger, namely to go in search of ancient ruins. At this time, the saint was thinking about the main character. Surrounded by flowers, she couldn't understand why some boy had taken up all her thoughts. A warrior came to her and told her the news. He reported that Feng came to the estate and neutralized the poison. She was surprised that it only took him a couple of hours. The thought came into her sweet head that it was worth killing him. At this time in the ancient ruins, this place was inhabited not only by spirits and all sorts of monsters, but also by powerful beasts, and an ordinary person would not have been able to cope with them. Lao warned the protagonist that they had to fear magical beasts more than people. The spirit thought that in this place people are divided into gangs and fight each other for battle crystals and other valuables. First, they needed to get to another city. A gang appeared in front of him. All three of them could not compare with them in terms of fighting spirit. They started demanding money from him. If that was how they did business, I would have to play by their rules. The guys were ready to listen to the boy. Feng suddenly demanded all the valuables from them. Suddenly, he hit one of them in the chest. The guys didn't expect him to do that. The boys shouted that they were ready to fight him. At this time, a thunderclap. One of them didn't even have time to parry the blow, and fell to the ground. He shouted that the bastard had killed his brothers, and he will take revenge on him. He grabbed the dagger. Baldy said he wouldn't leave that little bastard alone. Suddenly, a dagger was thrust into my back. How hit the mark. The master began to lose altitude. Still, he managed to get something from these bandits. He turned to Lao to ask her to appreciate the valuables he had received. He was curious whether it was possible to make a spiritual weapon from this iron and spiritual core. Lao replied that it was possible, but we had to move on. However, he was stopped by another gang. Hao smiled, and he started running away from them. One of the bandits tried to stop him by shouting. It seemed like nothing could stop him. However, there was nowhere else to run. Hao wanted to know what he should do. Lao ordered him to use Thunderstrike, and it hit the ground right. The others didn't understand what he was up to. They were overcome with the desire to finish him off. They heard some strange sound. Wings instantly appeared behind their backs. A winged tiger appeared before them. It was an evil tiger spirit. The guy said that we would have to chase after him. They had to get out. The tiger was ready to tear each of them to pieces. Hao opened the map to see where they were, and it turned out they were in the red zone. Hao didn't understand what that sound was. Lao said it sounded like a creature of too high a level. They had not met the highest level of martial ancestors for a long time. The hero was ready to go himself. He took a few steps. Suddenly, a monster pounced on him. Feng pleaded with Lao because he knew he would simply be killed at this point. Hao used the power of the ring, and the monster was thrown forward a great distance. He managed to pacify this goblin. He used the hand of God. The energy was so strong that it began to destroy everything around. Lao explained that this was the spiritual core of the wooden attribute. Besides, he only spent 10 gold pieces on it. Lao replied that she was tired. Some of her strength had gone after the blow, and she needed rest. Hao was outraged that she couldn't regain her strength. Lao said she wouldn't die. It was no longer worth relying only on the masters in battles. It was necessary to find a way to restore vitality. They finally arrived at the place. Hao was interested in the rock paintings. Lao replied that he was not yet mature enough to understand the signs of such a high meaning. The guy was offended that she called him stupid. However, curiosity got the better of him. He wanted to know what happened in this mysterious place many years ago. He touched one of the drawings. Then he turned to his spirit. He was frightened by the wave of energy coming from the wall. Lao replied that he shouldn't panic. He couldn't understand why the wall was emitting quite living energy. Little Lao invited him to touch the drawing again. His hand fell on the wall again, and a glow appeared around it, as if the stone had come to life. Energy began to spread as huge matter in space. Small glowing spheres separated from the wall, which delighted the protagonist. When he raised his hand again, the glow intensified. Lao also thought about the unusual origin of the energy. She had never encountered such a phenomenon before. Feng couldn't find a decent explanation for this. The little girl suggested that he collect as much energy as his mortal body could bear. Soon the guy found himself in a calm environment. He began to wonder why nothing had changed after he had eaten the dragon meat. He heard a noise not far from him. He put out the fire and tried to make himself less noticeable. A couple of minutes later, 4 bandits appeared, clearly looking for someone, but the guy managed to escape. Judging by their breathing, All of these people are at least at the level of a martial ancestor. Something slipped in front of him. A figure appeared in the air. The man ordered them to turn everything upside down, but at all costs to find the guy. They began to use force, without any mercy for those around them. Hao was scared when something penetrated his clothes. The man ordered them to blow up the stone. The main character could no longer hide. A wave from the impact began to spread around. The boys looked up. The old man replied that they had to leave as soon as possible. Feng still had to hide behind the stone wall. Lao saw what was happening and warned the boy that if he didn't run away, things would get worse for him. However, the main character did not want to just run away. The ring began to glow, and Lao's voice ordered him to save his life. The guy immediately jumped up. A second later, the sound of footsteps was heard. A huge bird's paw stepped onto the stone floor. It was a fire tiger with the body of a dragon. Its dimensions were incredible. It destroyed everything in its path. Feng had never encountered such monsters before, so naturally he ran away. By the time morning came, he stopped running and made a halt. The spirit appeared out of nowhere. She was glad that he was lucky enough to survive. Junior Feng was unhappy that he almost died. Lao suggested that he should see what he had up his sleeve before getting upset with her. He began to examine the sleeve. There was a cutest little animal hiding inside the sleeve. The guy was scared by such a sudden meeting. Lao replied that such a monster was much more terrible than the fire tiger dragon. The guy tried to pet the animal and assumed that it was a baby animal. Lao laughed and said that he was really lucky. The little animal immediately crawled under his robe, apparently considering it the safest place. The spirit immediately decided to teach him a lesson and tell him about the different types of magical beasts, as well as how a wild beast differed from an ancient magical creature. It turned out that they are extremely weak in their ability to reproduce. The higher the rank of the animal, the greater the chance of having a cub. Lao thought for a moment, but replied that it would be impossible to tame an adult beast, but one could try to train the creature. The guy asked what exactly was required of him. First, you need to please him. The boy took the animal in his hand, and it seemed to him like a toy. Its fur was very soft, but the little animal began to hiss at him. Most likely, he just had to get used to it. Hao realized that this little animal would simply suck all the energy out of him. Little Lao replied that if he used the crystal, it would speed up the process. The main character took him in his arms and gave him a name. After some time, they headed towards the city. It turned out that they would have to go around, otherwise there was a risk of dying. The animal has almost gotten used to the guy. Suddenly, the beast got out and started running. The guy started chasing after him. He lacked agility. The beast stopped and began actively digging something. Then he got the guy's attention to look. The main character used magic, and huge layers of earth immediately began to collapse. Dust instantly rose in the valley. A battle crystal appeared outside. The main character thought that if it weren't for this talented little animal, he wouldn't have been able to find the treasure. The little animal immediately took a liking to the sphere and began gnawing on it. Hao shouted at the creature, afraid that it might swallow the crystal. He then explained that if you eat the crystal, the energy attribute will not exist. He was surprised that he had such sharp teeth. Lao appeared, as usual, too suddenly. She told the guy that his pet could sense aura. She then reminded them that they needed to get to Ju City as quickly as possible. It is the only safe place among the deserted ruins, and besides, this city was founded by someone from the Jin dynasty. In the crowd, he sensed the aura of a martial ancestor, which was a rare thing. Lao explained that in this city you can't break the laws, otherwise you can be executed. Hao was puzzled that it would be difficult to easily obtain funds in such a big city. The signs contained inscriptions calling for people to place bets on the stones. In any of these shops, he would come across a stone with a crystal hidden inside, and if he was lucky, he would most likely be able to obtain iron. The guy became interested when he heard about the hardware. Besides, Lao reminded him that with the help of the new animal, he could easily figure out where something valuable was hidden. Feng decided that he absolutely had to make a bet. Suddenly, the guy was thrown out into the street. The man ordered him to leave because he had lost. The guy replied that he had won, and they simply didn't want to give up the winnings. The man replied that he didn't care. The guy couldn't believe that this city could do this to him. The man replied that it was forbidden to start fights or kill anyone here. That was the city's rule. The guy started yelling at the top of his lungs that betting on stones was a scam. Several passers-by were discussing the guy, and the fact that they had seen him bragging a couple of days ago about getting rich. He decided to go into a smaller shop. Immediately, he noticed the stone. However, the stone crumbled in his hands. A bearded man appeared in front of him and immediately said that it was simply impossible to win in this place. Besides, no one will just get a battle crystal in other shops. The stones need to be destroyed on the spot. But in this place, you can take them with you. During all this time, he managed to touch a couple dozen stones. The little animal looked at him with interest. Hao immediately touched one of the stones, and then he said that he had made his choice. The man said that he would definitely find treasure in such a stone. The only doubt was the price. If you break a stone in this place, it will cost 10,000 gold. The others began to chant that they were ready to watch him fight for the battle crystal. Hao said that if they were so confident of their victory, he would allow them to break the stone for him. The man said they could begin. Energy gushed from his palms. A few deft movements, and the stone was chopped into small pieces. He had never seen an ordinary salesman turn out to be a martial arts master before. The man invited him to continue. This stone didn't have even a hint of an aura, it was just a blank. Hao ordered them to continue breaking the rocks. The master was surprised. A battle crystal appeared in his hands. He couldn't believe that there was actually something inside. The man congratulated the protagonist and handed him his well-deserved battle crystal. Everyone thought he was just lucky. Feng pointed to another stone and asked him to do the same. He decided it would be better to point out a few empty stones, so they would definitely not be suspicious. Hao pretended to be upset. He then turned to the man and said that he was ready to exchange their crystal for all the stones. The man said that only a gambler could do such a thing. Hao asked him to break all the remaining stones. The gentleman said that there was only one stone left, and if there was nothing there, he would be left with nothing. The main character asked him to break the last stone, and there was a battle crystal there again. The man said that in all this time, he was the first person to choose such a tactic to obtain the crystal. The others began to discuss his victory, and decided that everything depended on luck. Hao said that one crystal is not very good. The man suggested that he place his bet again and break the remaining 10 stones. Hao declined and decided that it would be better to visit them another time. He thought that he had done everything right. The next day he came back to the stone shop and was ready to continue betting. Feng immediately knocked out the first battle crystal. The shop owner congratulated him, as he was able to win 3 battle crystals. The two guys stood and discussed his progress. 2 weeks passed, during which time the main character won more than 100 crystals, but the expenses were much greater. Suddenly someone called out to him. A gentleman appeared behind him who wanted to invite him to their gambling house in a few days. For this his reward will be much greater. The guy asked what the name of the gambling house they were talking about was. The man said the name. People around were surprised that this was one of the largest gambling houses in the city. Hao agreed, but he wanted to be given some stones to take with him. Only in this case was he ready to meet them. 3 days passed. He entered a building that looked too luxurious from the inside. He was immediately met. The owner himself came out to meet the guy. The main character revealed his real name. The owner had never heard his name before. Today, many guests have gathered here to see the King of Fortune with their own eyes. They always kept their word. All these stones are at his disposal. If he can get at least 1 battle crystal, in addition, he will receive 10 more of the same. The host announced the start of the round. Suddenly, someone appeared in the doorway, and he shouted that they also wanted to see Hao Feng. The guys from the Jiangxi family appeared in front of him. The one in front is Yun Po. He became a master at the age of 20, and was known as the 3rd genius of the city. He said that Feng's fame had spread quickly, and they were very curious about who he was. The owner said that they were just afraid that someone might be better than them. One of the guys just wanted to bring a little more money to the gambling house, nothing more. Hao didn't understand what was going on, but the guy came up to him and said that he was ready to give him 10 more crystals if he could find one. But if not, he will call him master and kneel, and then leave the city in disgrace. The owner said that he is not the boss and has no right to humiliate his guests. The guy agreed. He replied sarcastically that it was not about the battle crystals. If he finds the crystal, he himself will demand that he kneel for such insolence. The owner asked the guest not to pay attention to them, and he announced that they could begin the competition. Hao walked past and picked out a few stones. The Jiangxi family representative said that such a simpleton would not be able to win. Hao selected stones worth almost 500,000 gold. Nobody was sure of his choice. The Jiangxi were sure that he clearly had some kind of trump card. The owner ordered them to break stones. The first stones were empty. Everyone was upset that he couldn't find the crystal from the very first stones. Jiangxi began to smile slyly. Feng replied that he was not finished yet. There were still 5 stones left. The guy bowed and asked the owner to break the rest personally. It would be an honor for him. One of Jiangxi's boys couldn't understand his tactics. Besides, they didn't feel the crystal's aura. The owner decided to fulfill their request. He also wanted to know whether the young master's luck was unchangeable. The owner grabbed the first stone, and he broke it with his own hands. The observers held their breath. There was one last stone left. 12,000 gold coins is a lot for one stone. The owner hoped that it was not in vain that he invited Hao Feng. Suddenly, the stone in his hands cracked and a bright light illuminated the room. It was incredible, but the owner had a battle crystal in his hand. The owner congratulated him and personally handed him the crystal. Hao turned to the impudent man and said that now he must fulfill his promise. Sanchi replied that he would not humiliate himself like that. The owner of the gambling house said that his words were worth nothing and everyone present would know about it, since he was unable to fulfill his promise. Jiangxi was scared. and he fell to his knees. The main character said that anyone can lose. Observers began to discuss what had happened. It seemed as if he was simply not afraid of anything. The second of Sanchi's clan said that next time they would bring him to his knees. Hao was surprised by this attitude. The guy said he was ready to make a bet with him. The hero turned to the owner again. The guy swore not to break the bet. If he wins Hao, he will be ready to leave the city. Feng was ready to hear the terms of the bet. Each person will choose 500,000 worth of stones, and the one who finds the most crystals will win. The owner announced that they could start. Hao Feng said that he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat him. Moreover, the enemy was ready to use the all-seeing eye technique. He almost upgraded it to the heavenly rank. The main character was interested in his technique. Little Lao replied that he didn't have to worry. Everything was ready for the start of the competition. Yun chose the stones. Now it's Mr. Feng's turn. Hao picked up the stone and said it wasn't that bad. He looked at the stones. Unfortunately, he didn't have the all-seeing eye technology. Each had about 7 stones. Xiangshu was sure that his opponent's stones were worse than his. However, the protagonist asked what would happen if the number of battle crystals was the same. Xiangxi said that in this case he would win. Hao was pleased with this outcome. The guys decided to agree on exactly this. The stones were smashed to pieces. A battle crystal appeared from one of them. Sanchi smiled. Another battle crystal has come to light. Sanchi congratulated him and said that he ended up with 4 battle crystals. The all-seeing eye technique, even at the heavenly rank, is a very complex technique. The boy didn't have a single chance. Moreover, some stones could still be replaced. Despite everything, Feng was lucky. It's time for the next stone. It shattered into pieces. The owner said that luck is not eternal. Last time he had to break dozens of stones for 1 crystal. The owner shouted that the guy had obtained 1 battle crystal. A battle crystal was already found in the first stone. The owner was ready to crush the stones further with his own hands. Sanchi was angry because he missed the stone's aura. The owner has discovered 2 battle crystals again. The dynasty's representatives couldn't believe that he had managed to find 2 battle crystals in a row. They clearly underestimated the main character. The owner of the gambling house said that the guy received 3 battle crystals. The guy was surprised by this turn of events. He was afraid that if he lost, he would have to fulfill his promise. The rest don't need to break stones. They knew that Hao would definitely win. At first he planned not to stand out too much among them. However, the situation has changed. Another stone was broken. It seems he is still far from such an influential family. At this moment, Mr. Hao Feng had collected 3 battle crystals from the 6 stones. The owner asked what the guy was up to, since he only had 1 last stone left. Sanchi's excitement was awakened. After all, he's just a boy compared to me. It was completely unclear what they were so proud of. Even if the last stone contains a crystal, it will still be a draw. However, the guy was a little scared. The decisive moment has arrived. Victory or defeat. The main character remained as calm as possible. Sanchi couldn't understand what was going on. The master cut the stones again. A battle crystal appeared from one of them. The observers were also surprised. Will he be able to find the battle crystal again? A golden glow illuminated everything around. Sanchi screamed that he couldn't believe he did it again. Overwhelmed by emotion, he lost consciousness. The owner declared Fan the winner. The observers began to chant. The guy was embarrassed and replied that it was pure luck. The owner said that he alone came across 4 crystals. He looked at Sanchi, who was unconscious, and said that it looked like he wouldn't be able to fulfill his promise. The owner asked him to take care of the master. The owner asked him to visit the stone storage. After some time, he found himself in a place called Yu Yu's. The doors swung open, and the owner cordially invited the guy inside. He wanted Hao to look at the stones in the vault. Inside the building, there was another room where the best stones were kept. The little animal began to move under his robe. Suddenly, the creature burst out and screamed. The owner was surprised by the appearance of the magical beast. Hao replied that it was just a gift from the elders. The man smiled. The owner suggested that he break some stones himself. The guy didn't mind and immediately knocked a battle crystal out of the stone. It turned out that out of 30 stones, 24 contained crystals. The owner had to win him over to his side, and he was gladly ready to give him all the crystals he had mined. Of course, he could not refuse such a gift, and he warned that the Sanchi dynasty would not leave him alone. Feng needed to stop in a place where it would be safe. The guy couldn't refuse the owner of the gambling house. Night fell upon the city. Feng decided to meditate a little with the battle crystal. Lao turned to the guy and said that the little animal would not help him hit the jackpot. Hao asked about spiritual iron. You'll have to try hard for him. The guy was delighted, and he asked to teach him. At this time, at the Sanchi family estate, the elder of the dynasty was beside himself. He couldn't just let what had happened go. He wondered who dared to challenge him, and he ordered him to go to the gambling house, and in a few days he would take a look at this offspring himself. A week has passed. Even in these few days, he managed to achieve success. Improve your vision. It was as if he could see through any creature. They contacted the master. The Yuan family was already waiting for him. They didn't expect to see such a young guy. The elder was angry. Feng explained that he accepted the challenge, but Sanshi did not fulfill his promise. The man screamed. The protagonist said that if he fainted instead of keeping his promises, no one would treat him better. The guy got down on his knees. The elder shouted at him not to dare do that. But the guy didn't get up from his knees. It was an admission that he had lost. The elder was very angry. He offered him a new bet. At stake was 1,000,000 gold coins and spiritual gold.